listeners and readers of AwardsWatch.com. This is the AwardsWatch Podcast, episode 193. I'm your executive editor, Ryan McQuade. Joining me today is Catherine Gonzales.
Hey, how's it going?
Sophia Ciminello.
Hi, everyone.
And Zachary Laws.
Hello.
I used the Zachary today. Zach.
You did, yeah.
I hope that's okay.
Calling me by my full Christian name.
Well, we are kind of getting religious today because we are talking about Tom Cruise.
Right,
and
yeah.
So whether you worship cinema or Scientology, you'll get a heavy dose of Tom today. We're going to talk about Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. We're also going to be talking about Tom Cruise's top 5 films, or top 5 Tom Cruise films. But I wanted to start off this week's show obviously addressing the biggest thing that's going on in the industry right now is that SAG-AFTRA has officially gone on strike. They have joined their brothers in arms over at the WGA, and it's for the first time in 60 years since 1963 that both the WGA and SAG are officially on strike. It's put then Hollywood officially kind of shutting down at this moment. It's put a lot of doubts into things that are going to happen in the fall. Obviously, that things are going to possibly happen next year in terms of release slate and everything. But also, too, just puts a complete full spectrum of what's been really going on behind the scenes. And if you've been following this along, SAG was in negotiations to try to have a deal done with, what is it? It's not the, well, I guess the studio.
AMPTP.
Yeah, God, it's get a new name, by the way, while you're at it. The studios, essentially. And so I'm just kind of open up the floor here. We're going to kind of be a little sensitive in here, but guys, I mean, taking in this very historic moment that's happening in Hollywood right now. What do you guys think?
You know, for the sake of full transparency, I should say that I work in film and television, both in front of and behind the camera. Both the Screen Actors Guild and Writers Guild strikes have obviously had an effect on my life directly. There are other things that you can do while these unions are on strike for work that are not considered, crossing the picket line. But, for just for full transparency, yeah, I am directly affected by this. But I would say that it's very important for anyone who works in this industry, either as a filmmaker or an actor or as a journalist for that matter, to be in full support of the Screen Actors Guild and the Writers Guild as they are striking for better working conditions, because otherwise we're not going to have a film and television industry for very much longer. This is also a part of a much broader pro-labor movement that's happening in this country right now, where people are beginning to understand that it's not capital that creates all of those things that you love. It is labor, and they have not been fairly compensated for quite some time. And I would also say that if there's any confusion about what people can and cannot do in terms of work and in terms of supporting striking workers, you can look to strike captains, and they have clearly outlined what is and is not allowed. And people like Adam Conover have also done a very good job of laying out what is and is not allowed. I also saw Andrew Leeds did this recently on the SAG side. So I would say look to people like that for any advice on what you can do that would not be rule breaking, or that you could do in support and solidarity with people. But I think it's totally necessary. And I would also say that I think that people who are concerned about how this affects things like, say, stars going to film festivals or, the Emmys or the Oscars should rethink their priorities, because it's much bigger than that.
It definitely is. And I know that, we are an awards-based website, and there's a lot of colleagues out there that are going to handle it differently. But I know I can speak for Eric and the entire staff here when I say that we are in full support of SAG and SAG-AFTRA and the writers getting a fair deal. Mm-hmm. And We have stuff that is already planned out for the staff to write about. That was planned well before the shutdown, and we will continue to do those in order to make sure that our website is still up and running and moving smoothly. We have these shows planned out for, I know a lot of our listeners out there are probably wondering, like, how long does Ryan extend? Like, do they just come up with this on the week? No, everybody here knows I've got shows planned for months, and so we'll address it as it goes on. And honestly, we don't have really a timetable as to how long it'll be. I mean, right now it's very uncertain from what you're reading in a lot of reports. It's the studios on their end, they're not willing to go to the table at this point. Their demands are kind of crazy. And especially given the fact that there's a major component to all of this for the writers and for the actors, and that's AI and the presence of AI, which is something that we will talk about later with Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, weirdly enough. But it is something that if this is not nipped in the bud now, then it'll have jarring ramifications for the next 20 years, because it was 15 years ago when we had the last one, and the writers settled. They really settled and didn't get nearly the deal that they should have got, or should have. And also the biggest factor that wasn't in that deal at the time was streaming platforms, and the idea of Netflix and Apple and Amazon and all these places that we love content from, but clearly are not doing their part to fully compensate the people that create all the content that we love. Sophia, you were going to say something?
Oh, yeah. I mean, with Netflix especially, and with other, streaming platforms, I think we talk frequently. I'm so grateful that we have The Irishman and that they gave Martin Scorsese the money to make that film. But it feels like with streaming and with all of the effects really of the COVID period of everything going to streaming and being released there, we're starting, I think, to see the bubble start to burst there, and to realize that that isn't a model that is sustainable long term. And I think just echoing what you both said, obviously, like, I'm in full support of the unions and of the workers to get a fair deal, and just, again, how important it is for SAG and the WGA to get the fair deal, because when SAG strikes, you have people like Meryl Streep and Jennifer Lawrence and these huge talents that are household names out there, speaking about it and speaking about its importance, and writers aren't as well known. So I hope that they can both reach a deal that works for both of these groups, and that they take as long as they need. I know we're all, everyone is eager to make sure that, things can get moving, and that they can reach a deal quickly. And I hope that they can, but at the same time, I think it's really important that they take the time that they need to get the best deal possible, because the last time when they had the strike together, it was historic, and it's going to have to be this time too.
Yeah, no, for sure. Kat?
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for people getting what they deserve, so I'm in full support as well for both of these. And I also I hope it's not a long time, but if it is, I wish some of the stories that come out maybe from people reporting on this is also from not just the writers and actors, but also the other artisans, all the other below the line people who will be affected as well. Because if there's no productions, then there's assistants, there's hair and makeup, there's costume designer that will not be able to work. I think there's some roles where they can do like commercials and things, but not everyone crosses over. Some people are very specific, only television and film. So I do think a lot of people, though, they get left out as well in this. So I know this the actors and writers kind of represent them as well, because if they get a fair deal, hopefully that will transfer over to the other people. All the people who take to make the films. And that's why I think moving forward, the things that are coming out, I want to be in support of for everybody who works on films. There's a lot of also people who people who watch films, they're not like us, they don't really know what goes into making a film. It just, you see kind of like the buzzy stars and like the big directors, or maybe a few of those things, but there's a lot of time and effort and on-set, pre-production, post-production that when I'm watching movies, I admire all that process. So for that reason, I want to continue and support the films that are coming out that have already been made, just in support of everyone who puts their hard time and work into it. So I feel like for them, at least, I want to support that part of it.
And it's important to note that no strike captain that I've heard has called for boycotting films that are being released, either seeing them or even writing about them. Obviously, if you're a guild member, you can't promote them. That's in violation. But in terms of seeing films, I've not heard a single strike captain say that is prohibited or that we should do that as well. But to your point about the crews as well, it was almost 2 years ago that IATSE was on the verge of striking. IATSE is the union that represents all of the below the line people. And I think that I don't know when their contract is up again, but they'd be good to revisit this AI stuff as well, because I think that if they're trying to replace background actors with computer generated images, chances are that they're trying to eliminate certain behind the scenes jobs as well. And that's going to have an adverse effect on all of those people too. So this is about more than just, movie stars and, writers. It's about everybody who works in this industry.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, I remember being at a festival, and I was talking with some below the line talent, and it was funny. We went into a movie, and we were talking about the IATSE strike, and then when we got out of the movie, the deal was done. That's how quick it could be. But also there has to be willing parties and willing participants. And really, to be fair, I will say a lot of the pressure for that started happening, and the deal got done quicker when the stars got involved. I remember seeing a lot of actors getting involved. Particularly, I remember seeing like Oscar Isaac and Jessica Chastain, and a lot of actors getting involved in making sure that all the below the line workers were taken care of. And so, I mean, I don't think with these places that need the content to keep their generating the money that they need going forward, they can't afford to have a 2020 situation technically again happen. But if they want to be stubborn about it, then it will happen, and there will be even bigger ramifications, I think, going forward, because as we're seeing, the box office is kind of weird, and it's fluctuating in weird ways, and or knows the streaming numbers and all those different things too. So, but I honestly, I think that this is great for the writers, because now they have somebody that can fight alongside them. I think that I hope that the studios don't try to just pull just try to get a deal done with SAG, and because I know from hearing a lot from SAG, they are in full solidarity with the writers here, and this will be a dual deal. And as for film festivals or whatever, honestly, if your approach right now isn't who gives a shit, because if these deals don't get made, we don't have anything to talk about. Really, we don't have anything. So if you're out there and you're saying, well, I hope this all gets done by TIFF, and I hope this all gets done by Venice and all this stuff, it's out of our hands. And so the best thing to go forward is to make sure that you're supporting the writers, and you're supporting SAG-AFTRA, and you're supporting the strike, and have the support, and they have AwardsWatch support through and through here, because
and there are funds you can donate to. You
absolutely
can link them.
Yeah, if you feel and if you're out there and you have conflicts of interest, or you feel complicated about should I keep working, whatever, no one should pressure anybody to do anything that they aren't comfortable in doing. But if you want to, just even by donating, or even by, if you're in areas where they are doing protests, like in LA. I think there's some in New York too, if I'm not mistaken, right, Sophia?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then go and join them. Just join them in solidarity, and you don't have to be a part of those unions. Just any bit will help. Just but anyway, we will be monitoring this as it is going forward. It is definitely something that will be talked about for weeks to come, and we'll have more information probably from SAG and from studios and everybody going forward. All that news, all those updates will be at awardswatch.com. Speaking of updates, and speaking of news, there was a big film that came out this weekend. It was Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part 1. Technically, it came out Wednesday. Didn't come out this weekend. It premiered with a 5-day weekend of 80 million and 235 million, I believe, worldwide, which is, depending on which Variety article you read, was either a good thing or a bad thing. But we're here to talk about the 7th installment in the ongoing mission for Tom Cruise to try to kill himself, and
for the sake of cinema.
For the sake of cinema, to
Yeah.
get us all into the theaters. And of course, the film is directed and written by Christopher McQuade, Tom Cruise's real life love interest. And it stars Tom Cruise, Haley Atwell, Ving Rhames, Vanessa Kirby, Rebecca Ferguson, Simon Pegg, so many other people. But of course, this movie is about Ethan Hunt and the IMF team as they are trying to track down a dangerous weapon before it falls into the wrong hands. Gee, that's never been the tagline for these movies before, right? The film has been getting wide acclaim. Obviously, Cruise last season had the movie of the year with Top Gun Maverick, the movie that quote unquote saved the cinemas. And he is back as the biggest movie star on the planet. I don't think that there's any debate about that. But we are all here to talk about Dead Reckoning Part 1. This whole thing is so big, it has to be split into 2 parts. So I'm going to kick it over to Sophia Ciminello. Sophia, first off, I'm just kind of curious what your thoughts on the Mission Impossible franchise is as a whole, because I know this about you. You're not the biggest action movie fan in the world. It's not the go-to genre for you. But
that's correct.
But yes. I think you do like these movies. So I'm curious what you think of the franchise as a whole, your anticipation going into this, and what your thoughts were of Dead Reckoning Part 1.
Yeah, so I actually loved this franchise. One of my favorite franchises, period, that we have. I loved Mission Impossible Fallout. That was one of my favorite movies of that year. And I am just so fascinated by Tom Cruise's period in his career where he is now, which is this partnership with Christopher McQuade, where he is trying to convince us that he doesn't fear death. But anyone who's watched his filmography knows that he actually is really afraid of dying. And maybe that's why he's a Scientologist too. But I really think that this movie, it has, I think, the core elements that I love in other Mission Impossible films, and we'll talk about those. But yeah, I think that the franchise overall is just really fun. It definitely has its peaks and valleys, like all franchises do. But Tom Cruise, he really is, I think, through this franchise and its longevity, he has proved that he is probably the movie star of my lifetime. When I just think about his impact on the industry and the way that he's been able to carry this franchise for so long, and through, different directors, through all of these, various locations, and they've kept it fun at its core the entire time. So yeah, I really enjoy this franchise, and I had a lot of fun with this installment too.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Kat, same questions.
Yes. So I do love the action, big blockbuster genre is one of my favorites. And I actually, the first Mission Impossibles, I had seen them, but they didn't stick. I think it wasn't until the Ghost Protocol, Rogue Nation, Fallout, those movies that I really went back and saw the other ones. And then I was like, oh yeah, I enjoy these. And so I do like this series, and I think Sean Harris is probably like my favorite like bad guy. So I missed him in this one. And with that, I'm pro parts. Like I'm not opposed to like part one, part two, but I think I'm going to be on the other side of this where I didn't come out feeling like the big movie high that I usually get from like the last one. It was, and it's hard because it's still a really good technical movie and still like fun and like a for the blockbuster movie. But if we're going to dissect it into like thing, it didn't feel, it felt very, and some of the elements of the story also felt very vague to me. And so I feel like it was very stretchy in this one, where I think that's why I came out feeling like, oh, okay. Like, and then I think a lot of the stunts that, or the big stunt that he did, I saw so much leading into it, like that I was like, oh, I'm sure there's going to be more and it's going to be crazy. And then there wasn't that. And I was like, oh, okay. So like, I felt like it's still amazing and there's still amazing stunts and the fight sequences. And I love, like the addition of Haley Atwell in this, but it just felt thin. And it was like the first time I felt like in this series where it was a little bit like, okay, I think they're reaching their maybe the Fast and the Furious levels of like how much more can you do. And I'm willing to go to the end of the the world with them, but like even for me, like you got to give me a little bit more. So on surface level, good. I think people will not waste their money if they go see this. But if you dig a little deeper, I don't think this should be two parts. I think if they had just done Dead Reckoning and gave us everything, it would have been like it would have had that movie high that I got from the Transformers movie, Rise of the Beast and Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 this year. So that's the feeling I was chasing and I didn't get.
Bummer. Wow. Okay. Well, Zach, we've got one person that liked it, one person that felt a little disappointed. So where are you, buddy? Where are you at with it?
Well, I might be the most enthusiastic fan of it on this podcast.
That sounds enthusiastic. I sound enthusiastic about the movie.
Yeah. I am an action movie person. I'm an action movie auteurist, I guess you could say, because I'm a fan of a lot of filmmakers like Tony Scott, John McTiernan, Andrew Davis, Michael Bay, even.
All right.
I mean,
what kind of like alcoholic beverage does an action auteurist drink? Like like for I think an auteurist, you think of like a glass of wine. What is it?
Wine, maybe?
I think a beer.
Box wine, beer,
IPA.
Yeah.
IPA.
That's what I drink.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
I guess I fit the bill.
Yeah.
Yeah, I pour out my IPA for my action movies, but
Okay.
I get depressed by a lot of modern action movies because there's this thing where and a lot of it has to do with the purveyance of superhero movies where real actors and stunt people are replaced by CGI creations. And we know all these things about how Vin Diesel and The Rock have it in their contracts that they cannot lose a fight on screen. And so I guess what I'm getting at is that there's a real lack of stakes in a lot of modern action films. You never really feel like you're watching something that could potentially go wrong for the people who are on screen, right? You're never really on the edge of your seat. There's two exceptions to this in the modern era. One is the John Wick franchise, and really any movie with Keanu Reeves at the center in it, action movie, and every Tom Cruise action film. And what I love about this movie and all of his other recent films like Top Gun Maverick and Mission Impossible Fallout is that Ethan Hunt is not invincible, right? He's a super spy, so he's going to get out of a scrape, whatever it is, but he's only human. And in every single action set piece, there's some new obstacle that presents itself to him that he has to figure a way out of. And he gets it just right at the moment where things are going to go really bad for him, right? Where he's going to lose his life. that's exciting to watch, and it's much more engaging to watch than not to call out any specific films, but movies where it doesn't feel like you're watching.
Say it.
Blackout.
Come on. There you go.
The most recent
there it is.
Yeah.
Come on
I don't
now.
know what that is.
The highest grossing movie ever made, according to still making profit to this day, I think.
Sure. I'm sure the Rock has seen a lot of residuals off of that.
But Ethan Hunt, I think, has joined that pantheon of James Bond in the best James Bond films. Indiana Jones in the original trilogy, John McClane in the original trilogy of Die Hard films, of being like that everyman action hero, someone who like feels as though they're not superhuman. They're just like a real person who is really smart and really
MacGyvering.
Exactly. Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly.
Mhm.
And like I've seen this movie twice, and I think the second time it worked a lot better for me because I understood what was coming, and I could just, there's a lot of like exposition heavy scenes in this film because it's setting you up for another film. But I do think that this movie, thanks in large part to the ingenuity and the inventiveness of those action sequences, which are just stunningly done and far and away better than anything I've seen since the last Avatar movie and Top Gun Maverick. Those make for a really thrilling movie experience. And I saw this at a crowded theater at the Chinese theater, the famous Chinese theater in Hollywood. And the reaction from the audience was just incredible. I mean, they were cheering at the end of scenes, they were laughing throughout it, they were gasping. And that's the kind of stuff that I live for, is an actively engaged audience, which you don't get a lot of in some of these modern blockbusters where it feels like appointment viewing. And, people treat it as like a second screen experience because there's nothing really that's going on that feels like it's of real importance. So I really enjoyed this movie.
Okay. So I love the Mission Impossible franchise. This is my favorite franchise on the planet. Sophia knows this. Many people know this. I love these movies. These movies, Sophia kind of put it really, really, really well. This is the franchise of really our generation. We've seen it evolve for the last 30 years, and they all are good one way or another. Even 2, like 2 is such I rewatched 2 a couple weeks ago. That movie is so goddamn insane, but it knows what it wants to be, even though it really doesn't know what it wants to be. And at the end of it, it's just a John Woo movie, but it's with Tom Cruise, and he's got his hair still from Magnolia. So, he's like, he's just running around, and so many slow motion shots, and Anthony Hopkins comes in there and says like some ridiculous lines. It's great. It's a great movie. And then, the first one I really think is just a wonderful, not only just action film or spy film, but a wonderful film from Brian De Palma. And I've always thought of these are great movies to to inject a really good director behind. Like, they're not just like, I couldn't name you any of the directors that really did any of the Roger Moore Bond movies. I couldn't tell you, you put a gun to my head, I couldn't name a single one. And I love those movies. Those movies are dumb, stupid. They were for its time what it was, but I can't name you those guys, or the guys that did the Timothy Dalton films, or even some of the people that did Pierce Brosnan movies. But I can tell you who did all of the Mission Impossible films, because they all have their distinctive directorial style attached to also making it a Mission Impossible film. Like, that still feels like a De Palma film, or John Woo, or, for better or worse, J.J. Abrams, or Brad Bird, and Brad Bird's sense of direction from animation, bringing it over to Ghost Protocol. And then McQuarrie kind of coming in and truly making it in this franchise his own. And this relationship that Cruise and McQuarrie have had that extends beyond just the Mission films, extends to Jack Reacher, it extends to Edge of Tomorrow, and it extends to even McQuarrie coming in there and really the savior of Top Gun Maverick is Christopher McQuarrie, because he had to come in there and rewrite a lot of that script, especially the third act, which is the third act that we all kind of love and admire. So I think McQuarrie has been, for the better part of the last 5 to 8 years, the reason why Tom Cruise is back on the mountaintop as the movie star that he is, because there was a while where he was just kind of going project to project and things weren't a hit, and he'd come back and do a Mission film and they do well, but then everything else was, you couldn't pinpoint what he was doing. And now he has fully just embraced that I'm not really going to make any dramas or any comedies or anything. I'm just going to be Tom Cruise action star. And I'm going to just try to do what a lot of people don't do anymore, which is I'm going to make movies with practical effects being at the center of it. I'm going to put my body on the line, and I'm going to give every bang for your buck that you can get when you're watching it in the theater, whether that's 100 million or, for this movie, 290 million into the budget. That he put all the care into it, because this was the first film he ever produced. The first Mission Impossible film was the first film he ever put the producer stamp on. So he has a massive heart for these movies. He's also got an insane ego and massive balls to pull off half the shit that he does in these movies too. I think that Kat's absolutely correct too. This franchise took a massive turn really at 3, because the franchise was kind of in disarray. Bond was doing its own thing. Bourne was doing its own thing. Mission needed to be kind of rebooted. Abrams did that. That movie is still good. It's not great, but it's good, and it's a good starting point. And Abrams is always really good at just kind of restarting stuff for others to then launch off of. Look at like Star Wars, where he did The Force Awakens, and then Rian Johnson comes in there with a masterpiece afterwards. So Brad Bird comes in there, and Brad Bird, the Ghost Protocol really in that film is a guy named Christopher McQuarrie, who was there and brought on to punch up the script and help them out behind the scenes. And he's an uncredited writer on that. That's how he connected with Cruise. And then the series since Rogue Nation has been McQuarrie all the way through, alongside bringing in somebody like Rebecca Ferguson and having the Syndicate, which was something from the television show that they've always wanted to do. And then, like Catherine was saying, having Sean Harris as a really great villain, which is something that the franchise has been missing since Philip Seymour Hoffman. The last 2 entries are absolutely fantastic. And Fallout is a movie I watch all the time. It is I believe, I think it's the great sports commentator Rich Eisen says, the drop the remote movie, where you just drop the remote, you're not moving a channel, and you're going to watch that thing in its entirety. And that's exactly what Fallout is. And that movie is like 2 hours and 40 minutes, and it just goes by like that. It's incredible how efficient that movie is. And so my anticipation for Mission Impossible Fallout was at an all-time high. This movie got delayed because of COVID and reshoots and everything. If you don't believe me, go back and listen to the audio of one of Tom Cruise's favorite and best performances, where he's yelling at somebody for not wearing a mask. And so we get this movie. And I think that I said a lot about it in the review, but I'll say it here, is that I think that this movie, it's frustrating, but in between writing the review and now, I've watched it again, and I've kind of forgiven some of those frustrations, even though I still think that those are very valid frustrations to bring out. Like, I think the first act of this movie is great. Like the first 45 minutes to about an hour, I'm on the edge of my seat. Just the whole the setup of it, even though I think like the opening setup in the submarine probably could be cut out of the film.
But it's
just
so timely.
but it's so timely.
Oh,
It really
that felt
is.
so eerie.
It's
It was
so,
so weird.
it's so weird.
Yeah,
It's
I
so
was
like
like,
on the
"Ooh."
nose, and you're like, what the hell's going on? Did they just shoot this last week? And then
I was like, are we gonna
then
see an implosion? I was like, no.
Me too.
I was like, at least there's only like the 5 family. I was like, please don't watch this
Yeah.
movie. I'm
but
sure they're
then
not.
but then like the whole reintroduction to Kittredge and the scene in the desert,
Mhm.
everything there, I was like, oh my God, this is incredible. Like McQuarrie, they've gone big epic. This is great. They introduced Grace, all this different stuff. They introduced the idea of what this whole movie is, which is essentially they are chasing after an entity, an AI entity that has been man-made, and and through who has made it is revealed in the film. And I don't want to say it because it took me the second watch to finally figure it out, because it is kind of complicated how they kind of set it up. And then because in the typical Mission Impossible fashion, or just a spy thriller fashion too, things are left out and not revealed, and through a lot of quick dialogue you are kind of thrown in stuff, and you're like, wait a minute, what did he just say? So I think all the stuff leading up to then the big chase in Venice that has been kind of highlighted a lot too, beyond just that insane goddamn jump that Tom Cruise did, is the scene where they're getting chased in Venice, him and Haley Atwell, and they're handcuffed. And I think that that's so fun and inventive, and way better than the very similar scene that happens in Fast X that happened earlier this year. And
Yeah.
but then there's a point where it gets to sort of a party sequence, and some people online have been calling it the John Wick sequence
Yeah.
of the film. And for me, I think that it doesn't belong in this movie. It's kind of weird. There was a movie I was thinking about a lot when I was watching that sequence the first time, and that was The Matrix Reloaded. And there's a scene in the middle of The Matrix Reloaded where the Merovingian starts explaining cause and effect to Morpheus, Trinity, and Neo. And after rewatching The Matrix Reloaded this weekend, because I was like on a really big, like, I want to watch The Matrix kind of high, that scene is so better written and shot, and it explains, and it fits the world of that franchise much better than it does here in the Mission Impossible franchise. And Kat, you're right. It turns this, sort of franchise into kind of almost cartoonish. It's very ridiculous, the idea of this AI entity and Gabriel, and it's also kind of like got religious, implications and all these different things. It's really messy. And then there's some stuff that happens after it that I'm still not a fan of, but I don't know if it's real or not. I'm not going to say, spoiler wise. But then the third act comes, and then everything on the train going forward while it felt like, McQuarrie finally just like, I want to make a De Palma movie, just like the first one. It also is really well shot and set up and staged, and to find out that, like, they had to make the train, and then, he, obviously jumps off the damn cliff, and that's all real and everything. You're like, Jesus Christ. They put all their effort into it. Now, some of the CGI is very wonky. When it starts crumbling, it starts feeling like a damn video game.
Mhm.
But you still can't not feel the stakes of it. And Cruise and Atwell are so good together, and you're buying into it, even though it's a part one. And I think that part two could clear up a lot of things with some explaining. And they've got a ton of other characters that they're going to bring in. Like, I know Nick Offerman and Hannah Waddingham and a bunch of other characters are going to be in this new film. But overall, I think it's not as good as the other McQuarrie films. It's kind of middle of the pack, but it's because it's also an incomplete project, because part two comes out next year. And that's not something I can say we've had a lot of action spectacles. I don't think this is on par with John Wick Chapter 4. I think that that's a much better film. And then also too, I think for the year of part ones that we've been getting, weirdly enough, Across the Spider-Verse feels like a much more complete film, and you're able to understand the mechanics of that movie so much more clearly and effectively than something like this. And this feels like, for the first time in McQuarrie and Cruise's relationship together, and then you guys, if you guys agree with this or not, their whole thing is they make the stunts first and then they build the story around it. And I hope and pray to God for part 2 that they reverse course, because they're still not done finishing, because this is the most convoluted film that they've made so far. And
you see the crack in the armor a little
yeah,
bit.
you feel
that's how I felt.
It's a little Spectre.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's a little, not as bad as that movie, but it's a little like,
I was gonna say,
come on,
like,
guys.
I wouldn't go
but it's like you had a good thing going, and
and then you
like
feel like, oh, they could make a bad movie.
Yeah,
like you're like, it's like they're not perfect, and I think that's the thing that
their bad movie's still their bad movie's still better than like
it's still way
everything
better than,
that's come out this summer, essentially.
It's their bar that I'm comparing them to. That's the thing. Like it's their own bar. So when I'm like, I'm mixed on it, it's not like I'm thinking this is like the worst movie ever. It's like it's still pretty up there. It's just, and there was like such cool moments in this, like the big, like where they're doing all the, I think I've seen some folks who don't like the different angles, but it's like an ode to like the previous movies.
Yeah,
and
the
also,
Dutch angles and things.
And also,
a Dutch angle,
and also I haven't, like, it's really hard to recreate the night. Like people have tried to do the 90s, like make it feel like the 90s gritty movies, and they were able to emulate that. Like I like wanted to cry during that scene. It was so beautiful, and I was like, this is so cool. It feels like I'm a 90s, like in the 90s movies, when, you know, wish I was like not 6 years old when it was the 90s, but to really fully appreciate that time period. But so there was like really cool moments in this one, but it just felt like it was a little convoluted. Like and it also felt like there was just, and also I was thinking that maybe it's also because I don't know how much COVID had to do with this. Like, and also was Rebecca Ferguson filming in Silo during this time? Is that why she's not in this first part? Like all that type of those things that like, just
Silo,
to be some people like, maybe they were sidelined for that reason. So if that's the case, like, okay, because of, I know COVID was a major thing, so I feel like maybe that's the reason, but it just didn't feel as tight. I felt like there was just, it was falling into some of these other big blockbuster actiony movies that are like good, but it's not the Mission Impossible good.
Well, like the submarine, bit. I heard somebody online. I heard somebody online say this, and while it does feel timely, for the most part in these movies, the audience is along the ride with Ethan. And we don't know, like in Fallout's a perfect example. We don't know about the apostles. We don't know how they connect, you know, with John Lark, and we don't know how they connect essentially then back to Sean Harris and in the grand scheme of it until it's revealed about halfway through. When you show us that submarine bit, the audience is ahead of the characters. And then therefore we're like, well, we know where it's at. So like the whole movie essentially is they're trying to find this location that we already know where it is. So it kind of then at certain points when you think back on it, it's like you're thinking, like you're saying, Kat, you're thinking back like, oh, so I just know where this thing is. They'll find it in part 2. Why am I here a little bit? Now the chase is still entertaining and interesting, but I would not have shown that submarine bit until the person that turns on, you know, Ethan and them essentially, you know, when the cards are played out on the train, that bit I think should have been shown there. And that's a case of editing. I think that you can then show the audience, because by then you've gone through an entire chase movie, and then you know that by the end of the movie, when the character knows the location of it by the end of the movie, if that makes sense. I'm not trying to tell them how to edit their movie, but that's just how it kind of felt.
I do think, I mean, I get what you're saying. I would just say that, you know, we don't know actually what they have planned for the next part of this. So it might, I'm guessing that
it's a reckoning. It's a reckoning.
Yeah.
It's a reckoning.
It's a dead reckoning.
It's a dead reckoning.
We don't actually know if you know, I mean, they could just in the first act or even in the teaser of part 2, have him find that submarine. And then that leads to another thing, right? We don't know that like the conclusion of this story has to do with him finding what's on that submarine, right? So, you know, I would, I would cut them a little bit of slack about that aspect of it, just because we don't know. You could be, we could be right.
True,
like,
but they do
Yeah.
they do show the damn submarine is still
Yes.
at the bottom of the Barents Sea. You know what I mean? It's
yeah,
not
right.
it's not
Right.
like it's
Absolutely,
not
yeah.
like it just like, because they explain that, that's how they pulled the bodies out,
Exactly,
that's how they
yeah.
got the keys, but they weren't able to get that out for
Right.
sure.
Yeah. I think, I guess, I suspect the reason they had that prologue on the submarine was to give the audience an understanding of what this
Of like the power
entity,
of
of what it's capable of doing.
For sure.
So now I will say, like, the first time I saw this movie, was with a bunch of critics. At the,
what do they know?
What do they know? Yeah. They should have just been like me and went without having to write a review of the movie.
Yeah.
They would have known. But I will admit that the first time I watched this movie, I was a little taken aback by how much time was spent in what I guess you would call the prologue of the film.
Yeah.
Right? In Aristotelian plot. It takes a long time it's like 3 full sequences of like, the submarine. Ethan, 4 actually. Ethan Hunt getting the information about.
It is 4. Holy shit, it is.
About Ilsa, going into the desert
to find
Ilsa. And then you have that long sequence where all the government officials have gathered to be filled in about what the entity is. And Ethan, I guess we're getting into spoiler territory for anybody who hasn't watched the movie. Yeah.
It's not that much of a. I
don't know. Listen, don't come after me, people, if I spoil the movie for you.
We gotta talk about it's been out 5-6 days. Like, come on.
Yeah. But yeah, it takes a long time to get through that. The second time I saw it, it moved a lot quicker for me because I knew what was coming. And I would recommend folks watch it at least twice, because there's so much expository information about this AI thing that can be kind of confusing. It is confusingly written.
It was when I was trying to write notes to review the damn thing. I was like, wait, who? What? Who are they? It was a lot.
That's why you should employ a memorization tactic.
You know what? I think that they should just send me the film and I just watch it in slow-mo.
I think Tom Cruise would be really opposed to somebody watching this movie on their computer. I
wasn't going to watch it on a computer. I was going to watch it on the back of somebody's plane.
Oh, okay, that makes more sense.
And then when it was over, I was going to jump out the plane, helicopters, parachute.
Oh my god! I don't know.
I mean, I get what they're doing though with the submarine. Like, I agree. You're putting the audience, like the audience is ahead of the character then at that point. But I think it almost feels like they were trying to stretch this into a part 2, and that was where I felt that the most, like at first, because I was like, is Ethan going to be here? Like, it feels weird for it to start without him and with us getting that information. And then, so much of the exposition that we get about the AI, one, it's very on the nose, like Tom Cruise fighting against AI. It's a little much. Again, I still had fun with the movie, but then as the movie progresses, every question someone asks about it, and this is something I get on Nolan about too, so I have to be fair, is every single question about this, the answer is, oh, we don't know, or I don't know. And it becomes this great mystery, which I appreciate. But if you're not going to solve that in the part 1, it's a little frustrating, I think. I do think this feels like, I think it feels like a complete movie at times, but a lot of it also was just the first few set pieces, I think, are so much fun. I love the airport. Everything that takes place in the airport is incredible. That, I think, felt like a real Mission Impossible movie. And then once we meet Vanessa Kirby again, once we get to that party, that's when it starts to go a little bit off the rails for me. And the John Wick comparison, I understood, especially visually, it did make me think of that. But in John Wick, those scenes are so beautifully choreographed. It's almost like you're watching a ballet where you almost unnaturally like expect that from this. And then when it doesn't deliver, it just exists to throw another wrinkle into the story, into the plot. It's a little disappointing.
Also, those scenes have minimal dialogue. And they're not being the action is the thing that is being presented to the audience there as the main course. While as this, don't get me wrong, guys. I love people sitting around shooting the shit in the middle of an action movie because I think that that's what I love about the Matrix movies, or even like the first 3 Pirates of the Caribbean movies. I love the idea of like rules being created, and then that film has to double down on the ridiculousness of the rules that they are creating. And Wick even does that too, to a certain extent. Like the first Wick is very like, trying to tell you how dangerous this guy who you killed his dog is. You know what I mean? Like you have to like, there's that whole monologue, like I sent him on an impossible mission, and the bodies he buried that day, built this place and stuff like that. It's silly stuff like that for sure. But I agree, like the first 4 scenes, it's a lot. That's why I think that the one that seems to be the one that I would cut is the sub, because I think the way you start the film is with that IMF agent ties in perfectly with Grace later in the film. So you can't get rid of that. You can't get rid of him and Ilsa because one, it's incredibly shot, and it continues the thread of this relationship that they've had that I don't know why people online or people just in general keep getting confused. The fact that they are tied together because, he couldn't have a normal relationship with his wife, Julia, and be outside of this world. But the relationship that he does have with Elsa is that of a companion that understands this world and can fight alongside with him. And so they're very much connected that way. But then the scene, yes, with all the community, as they're not called, you have to go through the press notes to find out who they are. With all the I know Sophia's like, that's the silliest goddamn name for a bunch of
I only saw this once, and now I'm like, oh my god, the community.
They don't call themselves that in the film, but it is that is that in like the notes for the press notes. Because I was like, really? They're called the community? Okay, sure. The stuff is so important, but that scene is so important because of Ethan's interaction with Kittredge. And to me, I ate up all the moments between Ethan and Kittredge because I ate it up in the first movie, and I ate it, and it's like it is nostalgia, but it's the right kind here. And then that moment propels then after the credits with Shea Wiggum and that pursuit then to the airport. And I agree with you, Sophia, that feels the most like a Mission Impossible movie because that embodies the entire crew together. That I think that's the problem of this movie, is that
they're always apart.
Ving Rhames and Simon Pegg and Rebecca Ferguson are sidelined a lot, especially in the middle of the film.
Did you like the Ving Rhames where he's like, I'm gonna be away, like it was like
I gotta go completely offline.
I was like, okay. Okay.
I want you to hear me now. None of the things that happen the rest of this movie are my fault. All right.
Yeah,
and then he just walks off screen and does like 6 more Arby's commercials.
Yeah. The thing that got me, there was a detail that got me where I can sort of justify it, but it annoyed me so much, is like Haley Atwell's character, Grace, is a pickpocket. She's supposed to be a really good thief, and she can't get the fucking handcuffs off. Like when they're like, she gets them off later. But they could have avoided the whole, like, it made that whole chase scene just null in my eyes, because I was just like, she would have got that off, like, if she's a high, there was like
in like 5 seconds.
Yeah, and by the time when she's like, oh, let's switch.
I loved that.
No, but I was like, let's switch. I was like, you could have already taken him off. Like, it was also
weird. Too, like,
that detail got me.
The first thing that when I first watched the film, and I think Haley Atwell's really good in the film. It's not her fault that I think her character is the choices they make with her as a character
Feel a
are
little
frustrating
weird sometimes.
because you're like, really? Is it going to take you to the point in which somebody dies in this movie for you to finally trust him? Like, good Lord, lady. Like, how many times do you have to keep seeing that he's not the one shooting at you? He's not the
I
one
like
saying,
that,
I'm going to
though.
kill you. And I'm like, come on.
It's like a chemistry test. Like, I like they're kind of like trapped together in the car. You're like, oh, like maybe, I don't know. Like it's frustrating. I can see that of how, she might not unlock it as quickly as you would think, or how she doesn't trust him, earlier in the movie. But I feel like that's just all part of the relationship between these two characters.
It just felt a little forced. That felt forced to me.
Yeah, I know that.
I mean,
that's fair.
I think I think there's sorry, I don't know which point to address first about Haley Atwell, because there's so many you guys threw up, and I have to just
the movie does the same thing, Zach. It's okay.
Yeah.
Just answer a question with a question.
I mean, I don't know how quickly you could get handcuffs off and somebody's shooting at you and multiple people are pursuing you at the same time. So I'm willing to suspend my disbelief in that moment, because I was just dazzled by the whole construction of that chase sequence, including the bit with the handcuffs, because again, that's that minor inconvenience that brings it down to earth more, like it's the same kind of thing of like John McClane in the first Die Hard, where he takes his shoes off just because he wants to be comfortable, and then he ends up being barefoot for the rest of the movie, and he's like having to walk on broken glass in one sequence. And it's like, well, I don't know what it's like to have to shoot at a bunch of people, but I do know what it's like to step on a piece of glass, and it hurts. And that makes it more of a human connection to this action star and to this whole sequence. Which I'd also say I loved the little Battleship Potemkin reference in the midst of this whole sequence. In terms of Haley Atwell's character, the thing that I've really appreciated about this series is that Cruise and McQuarrie, they've found that the right formula is not just having him at the center of it, but populating it with a array of side characters who are on his mission with him. I get the frustration of Peg and Rames being off on their own through most of it, and Ferguson as well. I do think maybe there's a bit of COVID to that, but it's also because they're introducing Haley Atwell into this, and I think she's a really great addition. And I bought her whole transformation, and I think like there's a moment towards the end of this movie where Ethan Hunt asks her to do something that no normal person would ever be able to do, nor think that they would have to do. And she says, "How am I supposed to do that?" And he responds, "You'll figure it out." And that gets to the secret sauce of these movies. What makes them so appealing is that you're watching people figure out in real time how to actually accomplish their impossible missions. And yes, she's this master petty thief, but this is a whole new thing to her that she's having to figure out, and it's exciting to watch her transform into somebody who can be on their team, right?
Yeah.
Bit by bit by bit. In addition to her being just a really engaging screen presence and having great chemistry with Tom Cruise, I appreciated the fact that he ceded a lot of the on the ground mission stuff to her so that we can see her becoming more comfortable in this role of a spy. Right.
Yeah. I think
again,
I think that by the end her arc is really great. I'm confused by why people think that Cruise and her have any sort of like they have great chemistry in the film, but those characters aren't romantic. Like there's been this argument online between who, like because, some people are like, well, I don't understand about, Ilsa and Ethan and then like to get, and what happens in the events in here then lead a lot to people then concluding, well, then it's Ethan and Grace. And it's like, no, that's not the case. Like these are two different things. Like Ethan and Ilsa are connected because they are the same person. Ethan is essentially recruiting her. A lot of this reminds me of why he stepped away from the IMF in Mission Impossible 3, and he's kind of training her, kind of like how he did with Carrie Russell, and how he lost her, or how his connection with Paula Patton in Ghost Protocol, having these people that have doubts in this job or be able to complete this mission, and he's there to guide them, to understand them, that like they have that inside of them. And they're able to find that. And
it's almost like he's also he knows he's going to be expendable at one point, and making sure that the IMF will be in good hands.
Yep.
Like, I think that's sort of like the nice tie-in with that is he really wants to leave behind, them in good hands.
I mean, like when he's telling her essentially like, that she's going to have to go and for the next part be a part of the IMF and trust Kittredge. He's playing. One thing about Ethan Hunt, he's always playing a step ahead, but he also too knows that like he wouldn't be in the position either if he didn't accept the offer and become in the IMF, and knows that the value of what it is to be a member of that team and be a member of that. And I think Ethan is such an interesting character. And it's what I talked about in my review early on, is that this sense of, it's not about patriotism. It's about this idea of the greater good, which is borderless. And yet his greatest weakness, like I think that Alec Baldwin says it in Fallout, his greatest weakness is also his greatest strength, in that one member on his team isn't expendable as the millions of people he's trying to save on the planet. And I find that to just be so refreshing, because it's not even really about himself at that point. It's about just the idea of doing the right thing and what is best for everyone. And it then makes a selfless kind of character. Ethan's a really fascinating hero. And the one thing that I will say is that then they tried to add a lot of backstory about him, and that stuff, that's where the whole part 1 part 2 thing is, because like you can introduce that stuff, but you need to kind of have to, even in this movie, the way it's set up, you need to explain it as to what, not just that he's like, him, oh yeah, he's bad news bears, I mean, like, how the hell do you know him? Because either now or later you're going to have to explain that. It was a perfect scene between Ferguson, Rames, and Peg, and he's right there, and he doesn't do it. And I don't know what the hell he's hiding from him, but that's going to have to be explored in the next film. And if it's not, then what the hell are those flashback sequences for then? It doesn't make any sense.
It was hard for me too, because I didn't rewatch all of the movies leading up to this one. I've seen them all, but I didn't do the rewatch. So when those flashbacks are happening,
you thought it was like,
I kept thinking like, is this something was this ever introduced in any way? Not in the same way, but are we supposed to know this? And then I got confused because they never really did anything to explain those. And I don't need my handheld or anything like that during movies, but it was one of those things where I was like, okay, so we have this like Gabriel character who kills a woman who has some sort of connection to Ethan, which is then connected to, him like joining MI. Like it was this whole thing that I found very, very convoluted and odd. Like if you're going to do that, you need to do more.
That being said, though, the action sequences in this movie are fantastic.
Oh yeah, they're great.
I agree with Kat. I felt like they built up that jump off the cliff, and while it's great, I've seen it in both just regular format and in IMAX. I think it's incredible. It's not nearly as impressive.
Behind the scene footage.
Well, not even just the
Listen.
behind the scene footage. I'm talking about like the Halo jump in Fallout.
Yeah. Oh,
That's a
Listen,
much
though,
fuller sequence. You know what I
there
mean?
were gasps in my theater from people.
Mhm.
Oh
and
no,
mine
there were
too.
people,
I
Zach,
mean,
there were people in my theater that were like, there was literally one woman, and I was at the IMAX press screening, and the sound literally drops when
Yeah.
when he jumps off, and she went, "Oh hell no, no!" And we've all seen it in the promo work, so you know it's coming, and even it you kind of are holding your breath
Mhm.
because you're like, "Holy shit, he's getting away with it."
I
And
thought it
it's
was
still
great.
good. It's still so
The-
good.
And again, like the way that it gets to that sequence, right? Where he's saying to Benji, "You want me to do what?"
Yeah, that's the best
You know?
part.
That's Mission Impossible because it kind of flips
Yeah.
like the role reversal, because like he always just does it. At this point, he doesn't want to do it. He just wants to do the simple, easy get in, get out because he knows the threat of the danger. And then Benji's like, "Yeah, you've done it before." You know what I mean? Like the underwater sequence in Rogue Nation where he's
Yeah.
just like 6 minutes underwater. That's
The
child's
frickin'
play.
the
you know?
hotel where he's climbing the hotel in Dubai in
Oh, yeah.
Ghost Protocol. He's like, "Oh, you do this all the time." Like,
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that helps it like humanize him. Like I know
The humor.
Zach was talking about that
Yeah.
before, and I think those are the moments where I love those because you're like, oh wait, he doesn't even like Ethan doesn't think he can do it. Like, oh shit, and then it makes you like as you're watching him do it, like like so those are the best.
exactly.
Yeah. But I sounds like we like it. Overall, it's a good movie.
Yeah.
Can't wait for part 2. See how this goes. I don't know what the hell they'll do after part 2. Supposedly also in what would be Dead Reckoning part 2, episode 8. He's supposed to do something even more insane than jumping off of that with the motorcycle. And supposedly it has to do with that. I think he's fighting on top of a plane,
I would not
like
put
the Wright
anything-
brothers kind of plane.
I would not
Oh
put
my
anything
God.
past this crazy MFer. Like, I
Mm-mm.
just
I think what would be crazy is he's going to have to go in the Barren Sea in that cold ass water to get to
Yeah.
the damn
'Cause we have
submarine.
to
There's
go
an
on a
under-
submarine.
And you know
underwater
he's gonna do
fight
it.
happening. Yeah.
That's why I'm
He
sitting there. I'm
heard-
like, are you sure James Cameron's not directing the next Mission Impossible? Because he might need the help. We might need a consult on that one.
he heard all the stories about how Kate Winslet broke the record for being able to hold your breath underwater, and he was like, "Oh yeah, okay."
Oh, I'm
let's-
going
Hold my
10
beer.
minutes now. Hold my beer. Hold my fins. You know what I mean? So
I do wonder if spoilers are okay. This isn't just an idea for the last part. But everything with the cruciform key, him doing all of these like big stunts and chasing death, like do we think we're getting some sort of like Christ-like allegory to
Oh, you
Ethan
think that
Hunt?
Oh, you think Ethan Hunt
And he's
is
gonna
Jesus?
die. Yeah.
You mean the savior of cinema drinking his own Kool-Aid?
Tom Cruise has done crazier things.
I
wouldn't put it
don't
past
think
him.
I don't think so, because I mean McQuarrie's recent comments were that they are already talking about what they're going to do for part 9.
So he'll
I
come
don't
back to life.
well
Exactly.
I think
He could die and be resurrected.
well he already has died and gotten resurrected.
Yeah.
That happens in part 3. Julia does that. He has to stop his because he's got that thing in his head.
Oh yeah.
That's right.
I know way too much about this franchise, guys. But
That's why
I will
have to ask
say,
the expert.
well, I think the other thing is too is he's recently talked about wanting to do a Mission Impossible film, kind of like Harrison Ford when he's 80, and
I
so
think he will.
yeah, I think he will. I think he'll be like the escape from the old folks home or whatever. You know what I mean? And they got
I'm
me
gonna
locked in here.
I'm going
Yeah.
to keep watching him for as long as he makes them. I'll be,
Yeah.
see, he's 61 right now. I'll be in my 50s by the time that comes out. I'll still go see it.
Good for him also
So-
not using the de-aging technology. I heard that they were
Yeah.
thinking about using that, and that would have
No.
been stupid. The budget's already bad enough. It doesn't need that added to it. So
Yeah, I do
Um,
appreciate him literally giving putting his life on the line for the love of cinema. Like I say, I love movies, but he loves movies.
Yeah, I know. I think all these
So
people
you have to appreciate that.
all these people
on
are
some
like,
level.
"Oh, what movies does he love?" I don't know, the ones he makes for you.
Yeah.
How about that?
Yeah, and then like even the message before, like making sure like, hey guys, we made it for you. Like, I don't know. It's all I
So
love. Like,
corny.
yeah, but it's movies are corny. I love
Such
it.
a dad.
Mhm.
It's such like a dad thing. Also, too, like if saw the people that literally went to AMC, saw the Nicole Kidman thing, and then saw
Yeah.
that message, it's like, God, what era are we in?
Your
So-
divorced mom and dad are telling
Yeah.
you to
To
The
watch
eyes
the
wide
Continue
movie.
shut
loving-
of our time.
yeah,
yeah, it's like
They're
the
far and
Fablemans,
away.
right? Like
the Harvard. That is our review of Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part 1. We'll have the whole crew back next year for Part 2. I feel like we got to do it, right? I guess.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
We're gonna jump into our top 5 Tom Cruise movies, not his performances. Somebody here was asking me that question earlier this week, and I said, you know what? I think movies would be a lot more looser and fun, and breaking down his performances is that's another day. Maybe that's what we do next year. We talk about his performances. But yeah, top 5 Tom Cruise movies. Have you ever heard of top 5 here on AwardsWatch podcast? We go 5 to 1, and if somebody brings up a title, we talk about it collectively as a group then. So even if that is somebody's number 1, they'll obviously get the time to talk about it, but it's just so that we don't talk about the same movie 5 or 6 times. But with that, we're going to go in the order of Catherine, Sophia, Zach, and then myself. So, Kat, did you have any criteria, or did anybody, for that matter, have any criteria going into this, or you just like, nope, going to strictly just keep Tom, all the movies available, all of his filmography? I think he's done like 47, 48 movies. So nothing you omitted?
Yeah, I mean I haven't seen all of his filmography, so I'm sure there's probably some that are quote unquote better movies, maybe more lauded performances, but I haven't seen all of them yet.
Mhm.
So my criteria was the ones that I remember that have been etched in my brain, that have stuck with me since I've seen him since I was little, all the way up until now. So the ones that kind of mean something to me and are also good movies.
Okay. All right. Sophia, Zach, same thing?
I didn't have any specific criteria, but looking at my list, I think, very interested in Tom Cruise of another era. So I don't have recent movies really on my list. I think I was really thinking about the period when we couldn't really tell maybe necessarily if he was a movie star, an actor, or both, and that like weird kind of period where he was doing really interesting things. So, and I was thinking also about a lot of his connections to the movie stars of another time, maybe. So that's going to come up a little bit on my list. But yeah, I just looked at his filmography, and I think some of my selections have fantastic career defining Cruise performances, but I did select like the movies that I love most, certainly.
Zachary?
This is actually hard for me to narrow down because I realize I love a lot of Tom Cruise movies.
Valkyrie,
And
number 1.
he was no joke my most watched actor on Letterboxd last year, because I rewatched all the Mission Impossible movies along with like Color of Money, Top Gun Maverick, Magnolia.
Rock of Ages.
Yeah, Rock of Ages.
Oh my
Sure.
God.
Actually, I kind of like Sophia. I think most of mine are from 20 years ago. So, and I do kind of I did try to like tie in kind of both the quality of the film and the quality of his performance, because I do think those are, if I'm thinking about like Tom Cruise movies, it's like I wouldn't necessarily put The Outsiders on here, right? Because he's hardly in that, right?
Yeah.
Or Tropic Thunder, for another example. Golden Globe nominated.
Yeah, I was going to
supporting
say
actor
Golden Globe
performance.
nominated for Tropic Thunder. So
The Hollywood Foreign Press loved him more than the Academy.
They did, and now Tom Cruise doesn't love them anymore. So
he said return to sender on those awards. So,
but I'm really interested to hear what the rest of you guys have on your lists and how much we line up, because this was hard for me to narrow down.
Yeah,
to just 5.
as we're recording this, I have 6 movies and I need to get it down to 5. So it's going to be real tough I got to kill a darling here.
Mhm.
So
Same.
well, while we're doing that, Kat, you're number 5.
Yeah, so this one is more, and I'm not good at ranking. I don't like ranking things. So,
I know, I'm sorry.
yeah. So these aren't really ranked. They're just like the top 5 right now, that I'm thinking about. So my husband actually introduced me to this recently, Legend, the 1985 film, which is directed by Ridley Scott, and it's like an epic dark fantasy adventure film. And I had never heard about it, and I was like, what? Like, and also I think he saw it. He's from Colombia, so he saw it like a different version of it. So we saw, I think, I don't know if it was like the director's cut that's available or which one, but it's so interesting. Like, it's just such a weird like Tom Cruise movie, and I was like, I just never would have. But it also sort of foreshadows like this big epic kind of thing, and he's really into it. And it's like baby Tom Cruise. There's a lot of glitter, so it's just like, I don't know. I loved watching this movie, so it's sort of like one of my favorites of recent times. That just in term, and also I'm a big sci-fi kind of fantasy nerd, so I was like, I love seeing like the earlier versions before all the CG stuff. So this was a fun one to watch, and that I'm going to revisit again. So just one that I've been thinking about recently.
It's all about the unicorns.
Yeah, all about the unicorns.
Tim Curry, everybody. Yeah, it's a wild movie.
It's wild. Yeah,
it's a pretty wild
like
movie.
Really, and Ridley Scott, one of my faves. So it's just like, I love the range he has as well. So I'm like, it's just going all out.
Did you guys have Legend on your list? Back number 1?
I do not, but I'm going to add it to my watch list. I've never seen it.
I don't have it on mine either, but I love Legend. I've seen both versions of it a couple of times. I have a Blu-ray with I always get mixed up which one is like, I think the director's cut.
It's Ridley Scott, so the director's cut is the one you want to watch.
Well, no, what I mean is I think that the studio cut is the one with the Tangerine Dream score, and then
there was something with
cut is the one with Jerry Goldsmith. And so I watched
there's a whole thing with the score, right?
Yeah, I watched the original one just because the Tangerine Dream score is so crazy. And I'll say also, like, I when I met Ridley Scott a few years ago, he talked about how, like, when that movie came out, he said, if I just made this movie today, what Disney's doing all this crap with their fantasy movies, I would have had $100 million hit. Right?
Yeah.
Like,
it wasn't well received back then.
No, and part of it was, I think, because he cut a lot out of it and changed it up quite a bit.
Yeah.
No, Ridley thinking he has a hit. Oh, that's cute.
But it was nominated for like the sort of like the best makeup and
that makeup is
cinematography. Yeah. So just for that, I don't know. I appreciate those kind of things. So I like it.
All right. Legend, number 5 for Kat. Sophia, you're number 5.
My number 5 is The Color of Money. I'm wondering if this is on anyone else's list, but I couldn't have a ranking where a Scorsese movie was an option and not list it in some form or fashion. But I find this movie to be fascinating because, and Ryan and I talked about it on the Scorsese movie series that we did for In Session, but I think what's interesting about this, if you're thinking about Tom Cruise as a movie star, this film, Scorsese was a director for hire on it. So it doesn't feel, like a key entry in his filmography, but as a study in movie stars, it's fascinating. You have Paul Newman passing the baton to Tom Cruise effectively. And with Cruise's performance, I think there's such a performativity in this role and in this period in Cruise's career that I find really interesting, that just feels like signature him, and that feels so different from Paul Newman, who he was at the time and who he was when he's younger. And again, like, it's a key torch passing moment, but you also have Paul Newman, who 25 years after The Hustler goes back to revisit this character, and it's really similar to what Tom Cruise does with Top Gun Maverick. And this is, I think it's, it's a true sequel. Like, it's not really tapping into the same form of nostalgia that movie does. But yeah, I like that he's a completely different movie star than Newman. He's this kind of hot young thing. And I love that era in Cruise's life for many reasons, obviously very fun to watch. But Yeah, I like the meta aspect to the movie. Eddie, the Newman character, really sees some of himself in Vince, the Cruz character, but he also, sees that things have changed and there are some key differences there too. And that's also not that different from Newman and Cruz and where they were at the time. So it's just a fun one to go back to. Again, not my favorite Marty film, but it's always a good one to return to, I think.
Zach, I know you're a big Scorsese fan. Is that one on your list as well? Is that in your 5?
I actually did put it in my number 5 too.
Oh, well, there you go.
Well, I like Sophia, it's hard for me to make any kind of list without a Scorsese movie on it. So that factored into it. And also, like, The Hustler is one of my all-time favorite films, and Paul Newman's like one of my 2 favorite actors of ever lived, along with Nicholson. But what I really appreciate about Tom Cruise in this specific movie, Sophia mentioned how it was a for-hire job for Scorsese. I rewatched it last year, and I was struck by how much of Marty's personality is put into the Tom Cruise character, right?
Mm-hmm.
And particularly with his on-screen relationship with Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio, the way that he is very possessive of her, very insecure around her when she's interacting with other men, the way that she sort of has this control over his life. It's very much in keeping with like Jake LaMotta in Raging Bull, or the relationship that Henry Hill has with Karen in Goodfellas, or Sharon Stone and Robert De Niro in Casino. Like, there's I was interested in the ways that Scorsese put himself into this big studio for hire film. And also, like, a lot of the things you were talking about in terms of the way that Newman, this movie star of the past, passes the baton to this movie star of the future. And it's a testament to like how good Cruise was, even at the age of 23, I think is how old he was when he made this, that he's able to like be on screen with Paul Newman and hold his own.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you don't get that with a lot of new actors today. And I think it's because Cruise was such a movie fan and was so reverent towards these stars like Newman and these directors like Scorsese, wanting to give himself over to people like that in this specific era. That's the reason why I think that he's so good in this movie. And yeah, I mean, it's like, this would be in my bottom tier Scorsese, but still, that's like better than most people's top 5.
Kat, did you have it on your list?
No, I actually
No.
haven't seen that one, so I want
Oh.
it's one of the ones
Oh, it's good.
it would probably would be on my from a person I really value their opinion. I want to see it. So, and then you guys now, so I'm like I'm going to savor it for a viewing sometime. It's
at my number 6. It's the one that I cut because I just like, I want to talk about this other movie a little bit more. I do agree, and it's funny that Sophia has it on her list, because I was, when we reviewed it way back when on an old podcast, me and Sophia, I was higher on the film, and I am high on that film. I really do love it, and it's really interesting. Like, what feels like like he had a couple of director hires. It feels like in his career, Martin Scorsese. Most notably, a lot of people love like After Hours. It feels like a lot of people like clamored to that one, and I clamored to this one a little bit more. And also, I his relationship with Newman, and Scorsese's relationship just with cinema in general. It kind of bleeds all the way through. It's a great sports movie in general. He's the one that gets Paul Newman his Oscar, and I always think, though, that like people think, oh, it's just like kind of a makeup win, for like The Verdict or other. No, it's a really great performance. And Sophia talks about passing the baton on. I mean, that scene when Cruise is playing pool and Werewolves of London is playing, and the camera is moving. It's all around him, and and you can just feel in that moment, oh yeah, that's a goddamn movie star right there. And the ending of that film is, you talk about Top Gun Maverick, the ending of The Color of Money in the final shot is, I think, absolutely taken from that movie and put in Top Gun Maverick when he's walking out of Ed Harris's office. And those are literally the same thing of like, yeah, you know, the movie star here, you think I'm going away and I'm old and I'm done. Yeah, sir, not today. That's not happening today. And I think I've heard him talk recently a lot about that film, his experience from Newman, the impact of what a movie star is supposed to be. That great documentary that Ethan Hawke did, The Last Movie Star, about, Newman and Woodward and their work. And I don't think that Cruise will ever get to that level, but he's trying now in his later part of his career to get back to the industry and to audiences more than he ever has, I think. And there's a lot of intention in what he's doing in even just these action genre films. And you can see that he's like, I have this power and this gift to get audiences to come see movies in the theater again. I'm gonna do my damnedest to make sure that happens. Whether he's not nearly as liked as Paul Newman, and I don't think he's going to get nearly as many like awards or accolades at the end of his career, but he learned from those people, and I think his curiosity in that time frame too of the directors he's working with bleeds itself from the 80s into then his great stuff in the 90s, this experimental stuff that turned him into that, what Sophia was mentioning, that really great actor, and instead of just being the movie star. For my number 5, I go from one great director, Martin Scorsese, to another great director, Michael Mann, and that's his performance in Collateral. I think that what's so great about Collateral for Cruise is it is the opposite of everything we think of when it comes to a Tom Cruise movie. And he's done it twice in his career where he plays the villain and the really disgusting human being. And I think as Vincent here opposite Jamie Foxx in this movie, he's incredible. I mean, the minute he's on that in the movie, the way that the camera is pointed at it's very reminiscent of Taxi Driver, and when De Niro's driving Scorsese in the back, but and there's a lot of sinisterness behind that scene in that movie. But this is from the opening 20 minutes, and here comes this guy with this silver white hair in this silver suit, pulls out 5 $100 bills, and you're on for a thrill ride. And there's no secret. Sophia knows this. I think Zach knows this too. My love for Michael Mann. I think he's a genius. And this movie, this was a really big year for Fox. I mean, he won the Oscar for Ray. He gets the double nom. He gets nominated for this and supporting actor, which is freaking ridiculous because he's the damn lead of that movie. But it's Cruise that I think really you are left with that impression. I think of the jazz scene, and how just evil that is, and yet also.
I used to live down the street from that guy.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, Barry Shabaka Hanley. He used to be my neighbor.
And
I'd see him when I was walking my dog.
But then also too, I mean, there's this like it's using the superstarness of him, but in such an evil, sinister way. And like we see him in a Mission Impossible movie, he's running all over the place. In this movie, he's running, and it's almost like the Terminator. Like you just know he's gonna kill you. He's an unstoppable force. Love that there's also like at the beginning of this movie, there's like a brief shot of him getting his bag, and it's Jason Statham. So just gotta love Michael Mann just having like probably Jason Statham's best movie, and he's in it for 2 seconds. But the movie is absolutely fantastic. Throw right through and through. Great Mark Ruffalo performance, by the way, too. Jada Pinkett Smith also really great. But yeah, Collateral, Michael Mann, just a kind of I it would be one of those movies if I ever got to talk to Cruise, if we ever got to talk to Cruise, it's one of those I think you kind of have to ask him about because it just doesn't feel part of the script, especially at that time. He's making, movies with Spielberg, and he's making Mission Impossible films in between and stuff like that. This one feels like an outlier, but yet it's such a great entry in his filmography as a performer too. So yeah, Collateral, I had to put that on the list. Anybody else got it?
It's my number 4.
They're number 4. Okay.
Yeah. Anyone else have it?
Anybody else?
Yeah, I actually had it too.
Where did you have it, Zach?
Number 4.
Number 4.
I was just.
Are we gonna match?
I don't know. We could. It'll be.
It wouldn't be surprising.
Go ahead.
Oh yeah, sure. So I also love Michael Mann so much. So I, of course, had to put this on my list. I saw this with my dad at the Dollar Theater when it came out. He had already seen it, but knew that I needed to also. So it was just a great, I think, movie theater experience. I remember too. Michael Mann's Heat was also like a defining film for me growing up. But this one, yeah, I love it also as this kind of beautiful, odd slow burn of a movie. It does kind of feel like an outlier in Cruise's filmography, but I love it as an LA movie too. Even just the one of the opening scenes where we have, Jamie Foxx driving Jada, and they're kind of going back and forth about the traffic and which way they should go. It's just like a delightful scene. But then once Cruise arrives, I do think it is his movie through and through, and he plays just such an odd character in it. And I love the look of the movie. I love how the city has this kind of odd alien glow to it at night. So yeah, I don't have too much to add on top of what you said, Ryan, but yeah, it's I think one of my favorite Michael Mann movies. Not my favorite, but also I think just an interesting film in Cruise's filmography. And maybe a transition point too, if you're thinking about him going from doing these sorts of like auteur based projects that are like serious actor, those types of things, to becoming more of an action star. It feels like a good middle ground.
Zach?
Yeah, I mean, like Sophia, I saw this at a Dollar Theater for the first time, and but I was 14 at the time, but looked old enough to be the adult guardian that took my little brother and our friend to see it. But yeah, I love Collateral. Even at the time, even at the young age that I was when I saw it, I recognized that. This might have been actually the first Michael Mann movie I ever saw, because later I saw the rest of his films, but this was like a gateway into this guy's filmography. I think that in terms of what Cruise does, Cruise has this thing where he is almost like a weapon in that he wants to be absolutely perfect at everything that he does, like with his stunts, with his learning how to play pool in The Color of Money, learning how to do magic in this last Mission Impossible movie. He just says, whatever you need me to do, I'm going to do it. And I'm going to do it better than anybody else. And this film kind of distills that about him to its essence and twists it for evil, right? Where it's like, you are now the perfect killing machine. And everything about him, from the gray of his hair to the gray of his suit to the grayness of his eyes, gives him this kind of steely metallic quality, right? And I think it's such an interesting play on his persona. And also just the individual scenes in this movie are so expertly done. Like that scene at the club where he goes to assassinate the guy.
Oh my God.
Is among the best action sequences that have ever been shot. And
when he goes full John Wick before John Wick.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Let's just say it.
And there's just so many. This movie was kind of like a transitionary film for Michael Mann too, because he's using digital for the first time, and he's using it to capture Los Angeles at night in a way that he never was able to before. And you can see a lot of the same kind of filmmaking techniques carry over into Miami Vice.
In Black Hat.
Yeah, exactly. You know,
for sure.
Yeah, I love Collateral, and you know, shout out to my former neighbor, Barry. So it's really good in the movie.
Kat, did you have Collateral on your list?
No, I haven't seen it as much to really. I think I've seen it once, like a long time ago.
Okay. All right. Well, if that's the case, then Kat, what's your number 4 then? Because these two already went off on their number 4 just right now.
Yes, you guys are making me want to rewatch it. Mine is Top Gun, the original one. I have seen it so many times ever since I was little. Probably, I don't know. I've lost count, and it was really and it's interesting because he did it right after Legend, and then I wonder if it was like a recommend from Ridley to his brother Tony to get Tom Cruise in. Yeah, and Tony Scott's film, I love it so much. It still has an impact on me. I think it's probably one of the baselines of why I love action movies so much, even though this one's a little bit of a different kind of action movie. But it has a lot of the blockbuster elements that I love as well. A very popcorny movie. But I saw this, on my probably, I don't know, on one of those like TNT reruns or something over and over again whenever we could get it, or VHS. I don't know. And I love him in this because you see a lot of different shades to his performance of, he's like the cocky maverick. He has iconic lines. He's with Goose, but then there's also like the romantic aspect of it, and also the pressure of being the best. And he ultimately, it doesn't end up being the best, and he has to kind of like compromise. And I don't know, I feel like it's a really good film. And I mean, it makes sense why, although I would never have guessed that it would have yielded Top Gun Maverick, the sequel, growing up. So, but it also is a reason, I guess, like a testament to this film of why, it had the base to really make a sequel like Maverick. So, and there's so many iconic lines that me and my mom used to like the Great Balls of Fire scene, and the need for speed that is just embedded in pop culture, that it's kind of hard to not select this film, even if maybe it's not your favorite. But it's just super iconic in terms of like the cinematic history, I think, in my eyes.
He's got a knack for having multiple films in years and taking over the zeitgeist, because he had, if I'm not mistaken, The Color of Money, and
they were the same year, yeah.
And Top Gun, and then he has a pretty strong year for some movies that we'll talk about later. Anybody else have the original Top Gun on their list? No?
No, I mean, I love it because, like I said at the start of this, I'm a huge Tony Scott fan, and
me too.
It's and a huge fan of Top Gun Maverick as well, which I think built upon the legacy of this first film in a lot of really interesting ways. And it's a great movie. I rewatch it a ton.
The question always I have, Zach, is who has the better filmography, Tony or Ridley?
Well,
don't do that.
Think about it. Like Ridley's highs are high, but their lows are it's low. And
well, he also
such good filmography between the two of them, though. Let's go that way.
Yeah, Tony Scott has like one of the best final movies ever made.
Unstoppable.
Yeah. Obviously wasn't intended to be his last movie, but it was like him at the top of his game in doing like that kind of film the best way that he possibly could.
Sophia, have you seen Unstoppable?
I have, yeah.
Okay.
I think I would pick Tony, actually.
Yeah.
I love Crimson Tide.
That's the
yes. Yeah.
I love Enemy of the State.
Yeah.
That's him, right? Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah,
that's him. Yeah.
Yeah. Man on Fire.
Man on Fire.
Good movie. That's another conversation for another time. Denzel Washington movies.
Yes.
Let's do it.
But my number 4, do you guys know the password?
I do know the password. I'm gonna
You do? Okay. The password this time is my number 4, which is Eyes Wide Shut. Stanley Kubrick's talk about final films, his final His final film. I rewatched it yesterday. It is going to be 25 years old next year. Can you believe
Today?
that? No, it's
an
24.
anniversary to well, yeah,
Yeah,
but
well, it's
today
today.
is the
Yeah, the day of
actual
recording is
24th.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I did not plan that, by the way. I just wanted to watch it for this podcast, and yeah, I think it is. Sometimes you see a director towards the end of their career, and they may not have it still anymore. But man, I can just kind of wonder what Kubrick was going to do in the 2000s if he was still going to be around, because he left us with on what a movie to leave us on. And it's so complicated, and it's so interesting and so provocative. And I know a lot of people get really shocked about it all, but I think really, honestly, it's really a more interesting conversation just about relationships more than it is about the sex orgy cult vibe that the whole movie, that's in the center of the film. I think that the Cruise's journey in the movie is far more interesting, the labyrinth he kind of goes through. And then I think of really also too Nicole Kidman's performance when she's going through the dream and explaining the dream that she's having with him. And I always love when a director acts in another movie. And Sidney Pollack's in this film, the great Sidney Pollack, and his scene with Cruise later in that film is just incredible. Throw in the fact that there's another actor then turned director, Mr. Nick Nightingale, Mr. Tar himself. Todd Field's in this movie. There's a lot of great performances, but I don't know. It's one of those that, man, it just kind of, when it ends, you can't stop thinking about it. And that's just the power, I think, of Kubrick. But, it is a time capsule movie for sure for Cruise. We were talking about it, before we logged on. I don't know if it's a movie he can ever talk about because of his, his personal relationship and the restraints he has within his religion. But it's truly, I think, one of the most fascinating films that he has in his filmography. And to be able to say that you worked with Martin Scorsese and Stanley Kubrick in your career, and you were able to deliver fantastic performances, is not something that a lot of people can ever say. And he is quite good in that movie, but it's a different kind of, it's not a superstar performance, but you kind of need a big actor to kind of guide you through to believe that they would go on the journey that he does. And then the paranoia and the questioning of himself afterwards. I just find it really fascinating. It's such a fascinating film. It's not my favorite Kubrick, but it is one that I can understand if it is someone's favorite, or because any one of Stanley Kubrick's films can be your favorite Stanley Kubrick film because they're all pretty damn good. But it is one that of Kubrick's films, it's definitely of the ones that I think of the most, just because, and it's the ones I revisit a lot because there's always questions that I think a generation of directors then try to either emulate or try to imitate and try to recreate the same kind of questions in their films in different ways. So very influential film. Eyes Wide Shut. Anybody? Nobody? Okay, cool. We can just move on. No,
Well,
I'm just kidding.
this is my number one.
Whoa.
So we can, yeah.
All right, we can just, yeah. Oh,
Go
is it
straight to the top.
Zach? Is it your number one too?
Well, as a matter of fact, yeah.
All
Oh,
right.
no. I didn't know. I was torn for a little while whether to put it at number one or number two, but when a film is your second favorite Kubrick, it has to be number one on a list, really. Barry Lyndon is, of course, my favorite Kubrick. Then we have
my favorite
Eyes Wide
Kubrick.
Shut, and then we have The Shining, and this is a perfect little trio of insecure married men that I like to think about when I think about Kubrick's filmography. But yeah, I think in addition to just having the best, like most cathartic final line in a movie, just Nicole Kidman saying fuck, it's just so perfect for this mystery that unfolds in the movie. And the thing about it that's so interesting too is that there isn't actually a lot of sex in the movie for what you would think might happen in the movie. And all of the sex that you do see is very cold, and it's distant, right? It's fucking. It's not sex between people who love each other or know each other, right? It's just this kind of like cold, distanced, animalistic thing that exists. And that's so interesting for the movie. But I actually think this is Tom Cruise's best performance. It's like Kubrick understood how much insincerity was there with Cruise and on display in so many of his movies, and also underneath it all, that insecurity that he has. And he cast him opposite his wife at the time, which that casting ages better by the day when you watch this movie. It just, nothing is better than that. But yeah, just the fact also that like Cruise's cockiness in his earlier movies and in two of my other two movies I'm going to talk about, that just feels kind of like an act. And this performance feels miraculous. It's never going to happen again. And he hasn't done anything else in his career like it, which again is what makes me realize that it's just a miracle. And I love how, so many signature things that Kubrick does are found in this movie, right? The tracking shots, the long takes, capturing these big opulent spaces. That's all here. And it just, again, it has that like painterly elegance that something like Barry Lyndon would have, or that something like The Shining has when you're in the Overlook. But there isn't the same type of drama to it. It feels different. And I like the way that Cruise's character, he's so obsessed with being a good man, or people like perceiving him as a good man, which is why I also like that his occupation is a doctor, right? Like, it's interesting to think about that. And Cruise as this hero, right, of cinema, or an action hero in some of his other movies. But here he's a different type. And he's kind of just, it's all about having how Kubrick establishes that every character that he comes into contact with has some sort of sexual connection with him, whether it's just this like patient,
whether they want to be with him, or it's a patient,
or right, anything
just,
like that. But it's instead that's like never consummated in the way that you think it might be as the movie unfolds. So yeah, I love it. I could go on and on about this movie for a long time, and really anything in Kubrick's filmography, but I think it's this and another movie I'll talk about are like the two crown jewels, I think, of Tom Cruise's life, really, ever.
This life. Zach, it's your number one too.
Yeah, and actually, it was between this and another movie that I'm sure that at least Sophia and I will talk about.
Probably my number two.
Yeah, we're going to talk about it. Yeah. And I think I know what it is. Good Lord.
And actually, we were talking about the other day what our favorite Kubricks were, and
yeah,
I'd say those three, and throw in 2001 and Strangelove. Those are like my top five, and I think yours as well. So I remember. But I saw this movie for the first time when I was a teenager and first getting interested in films, and that was an interesting day.
Nice.
Checking that out from the video rental store, and the guys behind the counter were like, "Are you old enough to watch this?"
Where are your parents? And then he was like, "Yes, the beard at 12."
My mother used to say to these people at the video store, "He's just trying to learn about movies, okay? Like, trust me."
It's not. Yeah, he's not gonna. He's not getting any ideas,
right?
You know what I mean?
I would hope not. Yeah,
I would hope. I mean, like, I haven't visited out there in California lately.
Listen. Anyway. Yeah. I mean, I guess what I would add on to that, like, what I find so interesting about this movie in terms of Cruise's career, a lot of what Sophia was saying about how it's playing upon, because this is the era of Tom Cruise when he's in Jerry Maguire. And the last time I rewatched this film, I did like a double feature of this and Days of Thunder, which is the movie that he met Nicole Kidman on. And it's fascinating watching those two movies back to back because you see the beginning of their relationship and you see the end of it.
Mm.
And I think that, the line on this movie when I saw it for the first time was that it was an interesting failure. It was too cold and analytical, and it was like, a movie about sex by an old man who was not of the current world,
That's so mean when you think about the guy
or like,
died.
the world feels artificial because he wasn't out in it anymore. But I think that all of those things add to the cumulative effect of this movie, which is it's not meant to be a realistic portrayal of New York City in the 1990s. It's not meant to be a sexy film about sex. It's meant to play upon this. And it's very telling that Kubrick's original idea to play this character when he was going to do it in the late 70s and early 80s was Steve Martin. Like, that tells you what his approach to this material was, which is that the guy that Tom Cruise is playing in this movie is supposed to be a jerk, right? And he's supposed to be this like master of the universe who gets brought down to his knees, essentially. And he's supposed to be this guy who, has everything that you could possibly think you'd want. A beautiful wife, a beautiful apartment in New York, a job that makes you insanely wealthy. And yet he sees something behind the curtain that the people higher up have access to, that he doesn't have, and he wants it, and that's why he ends up in so much trouble, is that he's trying to get more, and it plays to the whole persona of not just Cruise, but movie stars in general in a really interesting way. On top of it being like everything that you said before, just like an immaculately made and haunting film with the best final line in cinema history.
Also, too, one of the great scores.
Yeah,
like that, the piano, and it's just terrifying. And I mean, in Sophia, you're absolutely right. Like it, in Zach, you too. I mean, this being a movie, by the end of it, you're like, well, this relationship's not going to last long, probably, and it didn't in real life. You know what I mean? It was, and it's a interesting film, not just in Kubrick's filmography, but it's interesting for both of them. I do love the fact that he's playing a doctor, and a doctor's supposed to be someone you trust the most, and yet this is a guy I wouldn't trust with my life. And yet, I was reading a lot of the negative criticisms about it, and obviously like about like, oh, the sex doesn't go far enough, and blah blah blah, blah, because a movie gets like labeled that, you know what I mean? They gets labeled as like the orgy movie or whatever. And it's like that. You both said it perfectly. It's like that's not the point of this movie. The point is the fact that like this is a guy that has everything. Just because something is told to him by his wife that may or may not even happen, it's about how insecure a person like that is. And it's so fascinating then after that movie, Cruise's trajectory as a movie star and as a person, and the deterioration that he kind of has. It's almost like they weren't even acting at a certain point. And so I find it just a fascinating film. Kat, one you're putting on every weekend?
No, my mom didn't allow me to watch this one. It's
okay.
sex scenes, and then I just haven't watched it. So it's a
trip.
Add it to the list.
Yeah.
It's good. It's a trip. It's on Paramount Plus. That's how I watched it.
Is it really?
It is. Well, they have.
That's
Well,
interesting.
Paramount's got like.
Do they
all-
like edit it out or anything?
Oh no, it's
No,
full on
okay.
2.5 hours. Just
My mom used to just like hold on, and then she would cover my eyes.
Go out of
and
the
fast
room.
Forward.
Yeah.
She would
Well,
just-
it's funny you
My
say
dad would
that,
be like,
yeah.
"Go out of the room here in the wedding sequence or the
Yeah.
night sequence in The Godfather. Just walk out of the room
Oh
for
my
5
God.
2
Okay.
minutes."
My dad and I were talking about this with The Godfather because I told him that we were able to watch it when we were too young and
Yeah.
how he didn't let us watch that, but he let us watch all of the violence. Just
Yeah.
like any
It's like-
Oh yeah, I watched all the
Yeah.
death and gory stuff,
Mhm.
but
Doesn't
like
make
sex
any
was
sense.
too much.
Yeah, it's like that's the line, you know. So
I think my
Uh,
mom just gave up at a certain point. She was like,
She was
"He's
just
gonna
like, you
watch
know
whatever he
what?
wants to watch." Yeah, it's,
you know,
yeah. After like I
Zach's
was
a
like
lost cause.
14.
Just kind of move on.
yeah,
you know.
yeah. After like
Uh,
14, I was whatever, but it was just.
Catherine, you're number 3.
Ugh. He has a deep filmography of
He
like,
does.
Blockbuster, those movies you mentioned. Like it's actually a pretty good filmography of a lot of different things. So it's really hard. So I'm just going based off like, like I said, the my feelings towards it. So one that I also used to watch a lot with actually with my mom is A Few Good Men. So it's
Yeah.
like seared into my brain of like a feel good watch. And also I do watch it a few times a year and it still hits. It's still good. And it's like I still remember that court scene at the very end with Jack Nicholson and like them going at it and on the surface, I don't know how well it did like in the theater because I did watch this probably like after it came out and cable or something. But it's like a straightforward drama, like legal drama, twists and turns and things like that, especially like military drama of the legal proceedings and stuff. But like it's weird because there's moments where you think it's going to go into like romance with like the Demi Moore character, but they don't, and I kind of appreciate that. It's just like straight forward, like the drama comes from elsewhere, and even like the opposing attorney of the other of the side is Kevin Bacon, like also this movie Stacked. So it's a pretty straightforward movie, but I also kind of like that. I feel like this is what I'm missing nowadays, where it's just like there doesn't have to be a million franchises. Like it can just be a one-off and be done well. And I mean, the ending scene is just so good, and I love the way it unfolds. And it's always, every time I watch it, I know what's going to happen, but I don't know. I love it so much. And Tom Cruise in this, like he really holds it together. He's sort of the underdog, which is sort of a theme in some of his movies. And then like, you're wondering if he's going to be able to pull it off, but you still don't know whether he can. So that's what I kind of love about his performance in this one. And then at the end, they just kind of, got to do it another day. So I don't know. It's one of my favorites that I revisit a lot.
$41 million budget, made $244 million worldwide. This was a hit. And then
The 90s.
TNT and AMC bought it, and it's still playing to this day. It's one of the most
Yeah, that's where I used to watch it.
rewatchable
Mhm.
films.
But I think
of all
I don't
time.
know, but I think it's like not one of people kind of dismiss it, like it's not. And especially if you see it now, I think if you didn't watch it in this like I don't know, I feel like it doesn't hit as well either.
Oh no,
So
I
it's
think
sort-
I
yeah.
think I think people are stupid if they don't think that this movie didn't hit. This movie rules. This is my number 3 as
Yeah.
well. I don't know where you guys have this. If you guys have it,
I do have it.
Is-
But I actually
Okay, I
made
thought it
a
was gonna be an
mistake.
outlier.
No, I made a mistake, and it's actually it's my number 4. Collateral was
okay.
my number 3, so
Oh,
I
okay.
mixed up my order a little bit. But I do have it on my list. Do you have it, Ryan? You said you had it. Zach, do you have it? Do we all have it?
I think this is the first time that we've disagreed. So
Oh, sad.
Zach, you don't have this on your
I
list.
thought I was gonna be the only
God
outlier.
Man.
Damn it, Zach! What's wrong with you?
well,
This movie's amazing.
Listen, I could have had it, but I don't want everyone to think I'm copying Sophia's.
That's
homework.
true.
Oh.
It's like, yeah.
So,
I was about to say we're gonna have to talk after class. This is getting ridiculous. God damn it.
No,
I'm glad
I
you
love
guys
this
have it.
movie,
I thought it was
though.
gonna be the
It's so
only
good.
Oh no, so
I
good.
love a law movie. And
Yes,
this one
we
is
miss them.
so energetic and just like riveting to me the whole time. Like I'm never bored. It also doesn't feel like the kind of like stage to screen
Mhm.
movie that it could have felt like.
Mhm.
I also feel like, again, with movie stars, I talked about Paul Newman. This is a great
Oh.
Tom Cruise, Jack Nicholson
Mhm.
showdown. I love Nicholson so much, and it just feels like this is just the perfect use of both of them.
And
This is
JT Walsh
also-
as well.
Yeah, yeah. And this is also good Aaron Sorkin.
I mean, Sorkin adapting his own screenplay or his own stage play to this. Sorkin's always better when he has a director for the most part. And at the time, Rob Reiner was the biggest, director. Reiner's like run from the 80s to the 90s. He has like I think a 5 or 6 film run that are just absolutely all bangers, great movies. Talking about like Princess Bride and Spinal Tap and When Harry Met Sally and this. So they're tons of great films. I love this movie. This is one of the most rewatchable films I've ever seen in my life. I will watch that courtroom scene between Colonel Jessup and Daniel Caffey every single day and twice on Sunday. If it shows up online, I'm watching it. If I'm wanting to just watch something to just watch a scene or watch something like Tom Cruise does with movies. He says, I just want to watch a scene of this or I want to watch a scene of that. This is a scene I watch because it's impeccably crafted. It's well staged within just the camera and the framing. But you have these two forces, cinematic forces, just going toe to toe, and it's just dialogue. And that, and one is trying to pull this confession out of the other. And I think like Nicholson only did like a week's worth of work on this, and they did this in 2 takes. So to know that they did that is incredible. To me, Moore is fantastic. Bacon is insane. I love a good Baconator in any movie, to be fair.
He's so charming.
Kevin Pollak, absolutely great to go alongside them. You then even have, once again, a part of this era has to include Kiefer Sutherland being an asshole. So he's always doing a lot of that. But honestly, it just moves. It always moves, and the dialogue is just so good. Sorkin had that ability early in the 90s, and then it bled in from this movie to then The American President, and then into The West Wing, of just being able to balance humor with this drama, make you be sucked in as an audience member, and a director making sure that you're able to also tame the language and the flow of everything perfectly. That's why like a movie like Moneyball and a movie like The Social Network work perfectly. It's because you have the director being able to wrangle in the writer, and it doesn't go far off the rails. Cruise is incredible in this movie. This is like of the actor, well, of like the good guy Cruise movies outside of Mission Impossible, this is the best he's ever been. Like, this is like, when you think of Tom Cruise, I think of that smile of that era. I don't think of Top Gun. I think of this. I think of him being frustrated that he has to do this damn thing. But then as more as he's uncovering it, he's realizing that this is a wrong injustice that's being happening to these two guys. And he goes down that rabbit hole, and there's nothing more satisfying than when he looks at Jack Nicholson. I don't know. So you got to be a good actor to have the stones to look at Jack Nicholson and say, and you're under arrest, you son of a bitch. Like, and you buy it every damn time. It's so good. It's so good. Also, too, like I love the thing that's in the film too, with the baseball bat. Like that's when he thinks the best is when he got the baseball bat. Cruise is so goddamn good in this movie. And it's a movie too that, like, I think it got nominated for 4 Oscars: picture, Nicholson, sound, and editing. And how that screenplay didn't get nominated for adapted screenplay, and how Cruise isn't considered there either for acting. It falls a little bit in that camp that Sophia and I talk about every now and then offline, of why Robert Redford never won an acting Oscar, or why he was only nominated 1 time, or why certain actors are put in, like why Harrison Ford's only been nominated 1 time. These movie stars that give these effortless
Cary Grant problem too.
Yeah, like the effortless performance, but yet if you didn't have that, this movie wouldn't work.
Yeah, it
And
almost feels like they take it they're underappreciated because
yeah,
they're
take it
so
for
good.
granted. Yeah.
Yeah, you take it for granted. Like all those people you mentioned like are part of my childhood, and whether, whatever Oscar winning performance is, I like those too, but like those aren't the ones I remember that I rewatch every year. Like, and these, I don't know. I feel I hate that they don't get, like, it's crazy that he hasn't, has he ever been nominated, or he's only been nominated like a few times?
Cruise
Like,
has been nominated 3
yeah,
times. And
yeah. And it's just, I don't know, but it feels like he hasn't.
well,
So
what's
it's
really
Four times. 4 times.
Oh yeah.
Well, oh wait.
Yeah.
Well, one as a producer. Never mind.
Yeah.
So yeah, 3 times.
Yeah.
I forgot about that one.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's also kind of interesting with this one in particular because he had already been nominated and almost won for Born on the 4th of
4th of
July.
July.
Mhm, yeah.
Who was the guy that beat him again? What was that guy's name? I'm being
Start.
you got. I know
Start.
who it was. I just was,
Mhm.
Oh, don't be like that, Zach. That's not nice.
No, I didn't mean it like that. I just was, it was Daniel Day-Lewis.
Yes.
Yeah.
He deserved
He
his
yeah,
first
he deserved,
Oscar.
yeah.
He should
Yes.
have 4 actually, but
Is
we
it
won't
just
get
really
into
bad
that.
luck that they just have it all of those?
Yeah. I mean, kind of is.
Yeah, I mean, My Left Foot, that was like a
That movie got nominated for picture.
Well, I wonder if they'll eventually do
Right?
the honorary
No?
Oscar
Am I
for
wrong?
them.
What, My Left Foot?
Yeah,
What,
didn't they get nominated for picture?
Yes, yeah, got nominated for picture. I didn't mean that to sound
Brenda
mean, but
Fricker.
I
No,
meant
no,
it as a
I
joke.
know.
was
Because I love Daniel Day-Lewis, and
Yeah.
I would never take any Oscars away from him. I would only give him more.
So, well, Zach, you didn't have this movie on your list, so I mean, you can't sit at our table or anything, but
yeah.
but you have your own number 3 to give out, so you might as well do that while you're at it.
Yeah. All right. Well, I know this won't be on at least Sophia's list because I think I know what her number 2 is. But I'm curious to see if it's on anybody else's. I put a film on here that I don't know. All right, let me start over again. My number 3 is Minority Report.
Okay.
Which is, I wanted to pick one of Cruise's big action blockbusters to put on here because I think it's so representative of part of his career as a leading man. And I had a really hard time choosing between any of the Mission Impossible movies or Top Gun Maverick. And then I remembered he's in Minority Report, which is something that I weirdly forget about when I think about his career, that he happened to headline one of my all-time favorite Steven Spielberg movies, and a movie that came in a period for Spielberg when he was experimenting as an artist and giving into a darker sensibility that he often isn't given credit for. And this movie, I think, plays with some really interesting themes that we see later on coming up in like some of the Mission Impossible movies, but really playing up the insidious nature of AI and how it's used to prevent crime. And it does all of this while at the same time functioning as a really great Tom Cruise action movie. And there's just so many great, and part of that comes from the fact that Steven Spielberg's one of the great action filmmakers of all time and is incredibly adept at creating set pieces where there's a lot going on at the same time. And you're never confused at any point by what's going on and what needs to happen and where the hero is and where the hero needs to be. And so, yeah, I love Minority Report. And it was honestly between this and Jerry Maguire for putting into this spot. But I ultimately went with Minority Report just because I watch it more. And that's why I have it.
Yeah. Anybody else have Minority Report? Anybody?
I do. I have it as my second one.
All right.
'Cause, yeah, it does feel it's weird because like you were saying, Zach, I even if I don't think, or like some of the movies I've been watching now, or at least like since that movie, like I still will think about certain scenes in Minority Report that I feel like are referenced in maybe like TV and other sci-fi films now, especially like, I don't know why, but I'll randomly think about him doing like the hand thing. And like, then when you see people doing like, it was like pre screens, like iPhones and things. So I feel like, just like other sci-fi movies of like the 80s, it's like ahead of its time, but also like it was almost there. So I feel like this was probably one of the earlier, like the first, more of the sci-fi film that I saw first before like those other ones that I saw, like from the 80s and stuff. So I think that's why it's also etched in my brain. It was like had a big crush on Colin Farrell, so I was like I really liked him in this. Yeah, so it was like one of the
I still have it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
Yeah, that hasn't gone away.
Yeah.
yeah, and I remember because I used to go to my video store and they would like give away the posters after like they were done like premiering the DVDs and stuff. So I had this on it probably still is back home. So I had like the poster and I don't know. I really like this movie. It was, and then also it feels, because I think about it and it's not like an easy watch. Like it's not, it feels very gritty in that sense, but I think that's how like the 80s sci-fi movies were. Like it's not like a fun place that you like kind of want to see. It feels like icky, especially like Samantha Morton's character. It's like a little bit gross. It's like whatever. But I think that's speaking to what they were talking about, like it is like the murder and like what they were trying to prevent. And it's not something that's clean. It's very like dirty. And then like the fact that, it feels very timely now, especially since AI and technology, that it can go bad and then it ends up, backfiring on him. So I don't know. It's a fun sci-fi thriller that I love.
I agree with you, Zach. Like Spielberg in this era, it's really the era we, you start getting, a little bit older, and it feels like his movies start getting a little darker, even. The subject
That's
matters.
dark.
I mean, you have like AI, and then you have even something like Catch Me If You Can that's dealing with the trauma of a divorce and everything. And it could be playful at times, but then that ending is very sad. And then you think of this and War of the Worlds. These are some dark movies that he's kind of exploring. And I haven't seen Minority Report in a long time. It's not one I've revisited a lot. Because it also scared the bejesus out of me as a kid.
Yeah.
But it's also one that I've been wanting to go back to those sort of 2000 Spielberg movies and give them a rewatch and sort of do some reevaluations of the things, especially after last year and watching The Fabelmans and thinking about his career and everything. Because that's one of our genius filmmakers that we have. So, Sophia, we're to your number 2. I can only guess, because you haven't mentioned it.
Genius filmmakers.
I was just gonna say, I can only imagine who you're gonna pick here for your number 1 or your number 2. But if it wasn't number 1, I knew it was gonna be here. So, who you got? What you got?
So I have Magnolia at my number 2. I imagine this is also on other lists.
Assume Zach.
Well.
Zach,
Yeah,
number 2.
That's
Okay.
number 2. Yeah.
All
And then
right.
Ryan, do you have it?
I mean, come on. Yeah,
Like,
I have it.
come on, number
It's
1.
It's my number 1.
Yeah. So,
Kat,
quick
do you have
story
it?
on Magnolia.
Yeah, Magnolia.
No.
Okay.
My Magnolia story. So I mean, I've seen it so many times, but my favorite story about this movie is that when I was in LA, this was a few years ago at this point, like pre-COVID, I went to this video store. I think it was called Cinephile Video, if I remember correctly. Yeah.
That's the one. Yeah.
So I went there and I was talking to the guy who was working there for a long time, and we were talking about Magnolia and we were talking about PTA, and he pointed me over to this section which connects my number 1 and number 2, which was where all of Leon Vitali's favorite movies were in the video store. Leon Vitali's Kubrick's, former personal assistant. He was Lord Bullingdon in Barry Lyndon. He passed away last year, but we talked about him for a while, and he shared with me that Leon Vitali's favorite movie, this would have been, 2018. His favorite movie of 2017 was Phantom Thread. So, and that one has so many Kubrick connections, and I just loved it so much. So had to share that story, but I bought the Magnolia DVD there from 2000. They had like the 2-disc from when it came out. And I was like, it folds open. It's like a really pretty case. And I have multiple versions of it on physical media, but that one is my favorite because I bought it there, and it has this beautiful little connection between Kubrick and PTA, who I feel like sometimes are very connected as filmmakers. But this is just, I think, Paul Thomas Anderson's one of his beautiful, beguiling masterpieces that happens to have a killer Tom Cruise performance. I think he's kind of the linchpin of the movie. And it's crazy too, you know, the like legend or story goes that PTA wrote the role directly for Cruise when they met on the set of Eyes Wide Shut. So it just kind of worked out that way. And I think that his character, right? This Frank TJ Mackey character is just this horrible person who is this like self-help specialist. He has this like cocky, evil swagger to him, and he taps in again to that a different sort of side of the coin of that like fear of male inadequacy that comes up in Eyes Wide Shut, that I think is just like a perfect use of Cruise that I really like. And I mean, there's so many things I love about Magnolia. I could talk about it for a really long time. It actually isn't in my like, top 3 or very high even for my PTA films, but I still, you know, love it dearly. And I feel like when you think about when most people think of Magnolia, they think about how PTA is so indebted to Altman also, not just to Kubrick. It has this sprawling structure. It's a big ensemble piece in a way that Shortcuts was for Altman, but it also has these like apocalyptic visions, and it has the frogs and the plagues that feel very of 1999, right? With the Y2K anxiety and everything like that. But it also feels like it's bursting with so much. It's an enigma with so much meaning to it. And I also feel like this is the first time in PTA's career where he made something that feels like very significant. And I know Boogie Nights is significant, but it doesn't feel like it's trying to be the great American novel in a way that Magnolia does. And at times, and I think he goes on for me to perfect this in There Will Be Blood, but this is where you feel like the energy from him as a filmmaker wanting to say something. And I think that's really special because he's my favorite filmmaker working today. So I had to pick Magnolia.
Zach, why do you love Magnolia?
Well, first of all, I love that, Sophia, you went to Cinephile while you're out here, because that's my go-to video store.
Oh, I loved it. It was so great. I need to go back.
Well, I would also recommend checking out Videotech when you're back over here. That's in Pasadena. It's a pretty cool little spot. I've lived in LA for 11 years now, and for 6 of those years, I lived on Magnolia Boulevard in Sherman Oaks, and Magnolia is one of the streets that connects all of the San Fernando Valley in Los Angeles. And so I would drive in my car from Sherman Oaks at the very beginning of it all the way down to Burbank, which is at the very end. And that was how I spent a lot of my time when I didn't have much else to do. And I just wanted to go out through the valley. And one of the things that I love about both this movie and Boogie Nights and Licorice Pizza as well is that they capture what it's like to live in the San Fernando Valley, which I think PTA knows pretty well because he's lived there his entire life.
Yep.
It's not the place where all the movie stars live. It's the place where all the regular folks in Los Angeles reside. And this movie, much like Shortcuts, which is, I think, the closest equivalent to it, is an intimate epic about unremarkable people. And I think it's so deeply moving that he would take these people who, work as cops and former game show contestants and, all of the dregs of society, so to speak, and imbue their lives with as much meaning and importance as you would a great man of history. And I know that because PTA has continued to grow and evolve as a filmmaker, and the perception of this film has changed slightly, where people say, well, it's a little overlong, it's a little overindulgent. And even he has said that, right? He's talked about if he'd made it today, he'd cut a lot out of it and calm down a little bit. But I wouldn't want him to change anything about this film, because for me, not only does it get to, a young man with a lot to say, but it was a very important movie in my life as a burgeoning cinephile, because that and Boogie Nights I saw back to back, and it just sort of like opened up my mind. And this is before he had even made There Will Be Blood. But it opened up my mind to sort of the possibilities of what film can be. So in terms of the Tom Cruise of it all, this and Eyes Wide Shut represent the end of a very specific era in his career, where he was willing to give himself over to a filmmaker and allow himself to be truly unlikable. I remember I was a teenager when I saw this for the first time, and watching Frank T.J. Mackey give these lectures about how to pick up women, I thought, well, that's the kind of man I don't want to become.
Good.
And it burrows deeper into what turned this guy into who he is.
Yeah.
Right. It's sort of brilliantly structured, where it's all like he has this sit-down interview with a journalist, and she's like slowly prying open his, the pain behind this persona, all leading up to that moment where he actually goes to see his father, Jason Robards. And I wish that Cruise, I know why he doesn't do this, and I'm happy that he's making all these great action films, but I wish that Cruise would, when he's too old to make Mission Impossible movies, would go back to work with people like Paul Thomas Anderson and remind people of what a great actor he actually is.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't really have that much screen time in Magnolia, if you think about it, and nobody does, because
Nobody does.
It's a huge ensemble. But there's a reason why he was nominated for the Oscar and should have won. It's because he does so much in those scenes to, show you what makes a man truly despicable, and how that man can then be redeemed at the very end of it.
Yeah. I it's in my top 5 PTA. It's my number 4 of that sort of early era PTA. It's the one that stands out because it's the one that I feel the director then we get from There Will Be Blood on. Magnolia is the movie I think of, oh, that's where that great master is. In being able to find this 3-hour massive epic of multiple storylines. Obviously, his favorite and most influential director, and he's notably said this, is Robert Altman, and PTA is our Altman essentially. And I love,
cry.
yeah, and I think that Shortcuts is not a movie that I particularly like go for, but the movies of Altman in his entirety is something that I latch onto a lot, and it's because of Paul Thomas Anderson. And Altman was unique in just every way, and you were just able to feel him as a director and as an artist inside his work, and you felt the energy. And this is Hard Eight and Boogie Nights. Boogie Nights is it. I like Boogie Nights. I don't love Boogie Nights. And
I do.
I know, but
love fucking-
and it is because I'm like, because I feel like it is him a little too Scorsese wise, and I feel like it is a little, it's not as it's not as focused as weirdly enough as something like this, and it doesn't feel as much. And I feel like as he's gotten, when he started in that era, he got better as he got to There Will Be Blood, and I just think that this movie, I remember watching it. I think I saw it in like 2001, so I wasn't far off from seeing it. I remember watching it at home, and I didn't know what the hell I just watched. I thought it was but I knew I loved every minute of it, and it just caught me off guard. And every time I watch this, I think, wow, that 3 hours went by so fucking quick. It was insane. And yeah, Cruise feels so minor in this because it's so sprawling and there's so much going on. And there's so many characters and there's so many ideas and there's the goddamn frogs of it all and everything. And then, but then why you remember his performance is because it is this lightning in a bottle for him in 1999. And it really, we talked about Eyes Wide Shut being like the foreshadowing of what is to come with him as like his relationship. This movie is a foreshadow to who he is as a personality now.
Yeah,
because
it really
you
is.
see him in front of people and he is selling his product so goddamn well that he has mostly dudes in the palm of his hand. And then he goes and does an interview, and the questions that he doesn't like is when he starts shutting down and judging the press and judging those people. Meanwhile, there's these feelings that we are never going to see in real life because it's all an act in front of these cameras and all an act in front of his audience, because deep down they're a deeply broken person in this movie. And those scenes, again, working with another all-time character actor in Jason Robards, but then also having the great Philip Seymour Hoffman in those scenes as well. It's magic, and only PTA is able to ever do that. Now, they don't clearly have a relationship anymore because PTA went on to make this movie. I don't know if you guys heard of it, called The Master, and Tom Cruise is not a big fan of that movie, and gee, I wonder why.
What's up?
But I do, and also I think that they clashed a lot in the making of this movie too, because Cruise likes control, and you have to give yourself over. Much like why Daniel Day-Lewis loves working with Paul Thomas Anderson, is because you give himself over to this genius and you see what comes out, which are these magnificent films. I think that this is, you're right, Zach. This is the last time Tom Cruise in this era started, maybe a little bit more with Collateral, but that's still an action film. So he's kind of able to get away with it. This was kind of the last effort where he's going and diving into a character that's much deeper than just the surface level. And I mean, I don't know if he'll ever get back to this. I mean, I get that, and I love him loving, to jump off of buildings and killing himself for us, but he was never better than this. And I agree. He should have won the damn Oscar for this. It's goddamn ridiculous that he didn't.
Well, you remember Michael Caine's speech, he said, "You don't want the supporting actor Oscar."
Yeah.
But it would have said, I would have liked to have given him yours, Sir Michael.
Yeah.
So
because you don't need two,
he already won one for a great film. So
yeah, he didn't show up that night for it. He was ungrateful. He was making Jaws 3 or whatever.
No, it's Jaws: The Revenge.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Don't get it mixed up.
Don't mix it up. For
he was in the even worse Jaws movie.
But yeah, Magnolia, PTA, and I was telling Sophia this week. I don't own it on Blu-ray, so what did I do when I was putting this list together? Went on Amazon and bought it on Blu-ray immediately so I could get it shipped to my house, because I was like, why don't I have this on Blu-ray? So I can't wait to, once I get it in, rewatch it again. Quickly now, my number 2 is the most recent film on my list. It's Mission Impossible Fallout. talk about a movie that's probably the greatest action movie of the last 25 years outside of a couple, which would probably include Mad Max Fury Road and The Matrix and things like that. It's the culmination of that entire franchise and culmination really of Cruise's entire action filmography for me. The Mavericks of the world, the top, the Edge of Tomorrow's, Jack Reachers, you name it. All these action movies kind of led up to this penultimate moment. I think maybe some of the reasons why even some of us are a little lesser on Dead Reckoning Part 1 is because Fallout was so freaking amazing, and it's truly just it's a movie that you put it on, it's 2 hours and 45 minutes, it flies by, all the set pieces are incredible, Henry Cavill's fantastic, Rebecca freaking Ferguson, Kirby's actually good in that one as opposed to in the new one. The team is integral to it. It's wrapping up a lot of the stuff from especially the Mission Impossible 3 with Julia. There's also just the emotional resonance. I even think of like the scene with Ving Rhames talking to Rebecca Ferguson about Ethan's just kind of core and soul purpose for all of them. I think the way that McQuade kind of shot it, it almost feels a lot like William Friedkin's the French Connection at times. It feels like a 70s kind of 3 days, and almost even like something like also 3 Days in the Condor. That they're completely running, they're running out of time essentially before this web catches up to them. And then there's Angela Bassett, who's fantastic. Alec Baldwin, that's actually really good in this too. There's so many great little pieces that kind of connect all this. But then, I mean, yeah, there's the motorcycle chase, and then and then there's the helicopter stuff, and then there's oh my god, so much shit in that movie. It's so good. I absolutely love it, and so it was my number 2. I had to put a Mission Impossible film on my list. Kat, was that your number 1, or do you have a different number 1?
No, I didn't put any of the Mission Impossible ones. I mean, that's like a whole different thing. I feel like, so I didn't want
it's kind of like when you do it's kind of like when you do a Pixar list and you want to set aside Toy Story. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I feel like that's just like a special category.
Am I the only one that does that? I guess I don't know.
I'm trying to remember when we did the Pixar ranking. It was so long ago.
So long
at this
ago.
Point.
Kat, you're number 1. You're the last one. You're the last pick here because we've gone through every other film.
Yeah, I was going back and forth between a newer one, which is The Edge of Tomorrow, that I think kicked off like a lot of the action-y. Like he had already had action movies, but I feel like that one, like he had just had the flop of Oblivion, and then like I feel like he was just like, it was kind of like throwing things at the wall to see what stuck, and then Edge of Tomorrow was actually really good. And it kind of like kicked off this next phase of like the more actiony movies in these later 2010 2020s. But I feel like it's a little too recent, so I'm gonna go with one of probably an earlier film I saw too, like when I would go to the video store and rent like what are the good movies that I got to watch, and one of them was Jerry Maguire. So and also it's weird because looking at his filmography and based off some of the ones I haven't seen that you guys talked about, it's also a rare like feel good rom com drama, like where he's not having this like with women, like it's actually like he ends up like with like he's not like he is an asshole in it, like an agent asshole, but then they end up being together like in a just a feel good. And I feel like there's not really any others where he ends up like that. There's always some like antagonistic thing, and
there's something like extra to the story than just
and then a lot of them he doesn't even have any like there's like tension but not really like any
well, there's a lot of reasons why he probably doesn't.
It's kind of a conundrum actually looking at his filmography and like him as an actor. Like I read him as a
heartthrob.
A heartthrob. Like he's a very good looking guy. Like he has this like megawatt smile, but he never, I don't know.
Like, he never leaned into it. Like, there's not a lot. You would think he would have done a lot more, like a Matthew McConaughey kind of thing, but did not go that way.
Yeah.
So it's actually interesting seeing it now. I felt like when I was doing this, I was like, oh yeah, there's going to be a lot, just because of like, I think also when I was younger, my sister was like 10 years older than me, and like it was in like, I watched Legends of the Fall with Brad Pitt. Like I was like into those 90s, like heartthrob or whatever. I thought I should be Tom Cruise, Brad Pitt kind of thing. But then like he didn't really do any of those. It was just like a good looking guy who was doing completely different things, not necessarily like in the romantic drama era. So Jerry Maguire is one of those that, I mean, the speeches and just him being, and also like seeing this agent life that I'm fascinated by as well. Not just sports agent, but the people behind the scenes that make deals happen. It's very interesting to see what kind of person you have to be. So I don't know. I it's one of my favorites and still holds up. So, and also Renee Zellweger is so cute, and I don't know. It's just so, and the little kid, of course, who was so good in it. Like all the elements just work so well together. Cuba Gooding Jr. Yeah,
Oscar winner.
Yeah.
I mean,
show me the money.
Show me the money.
If I'd had a ballot that year, I would have voted for Cruise in Best Actor for this, because he wasn't competing against Daniel Day-Lewis this time.
Who won
that's a lot easier to.
Who won that Oscar?
It was Jeffrey Rush and Shine, which I mean, I don't like Shine that much. I don't hate it, but I've never had any desire to rewatch it, and I think that Cruise, and it was actually it was hard for me narrowing it down because I wanted to have Jerry Maguire or Mission Impossible Fallout or Ghost Pro. It was like so many movies that I wanted to like
Night and Day.
Yeah, Night and Day. Or even Edge of Tomorrow, I think is really great.
Edge of Tomorrow is great because it's one of the I really hate the sort of Groundhog Day trope sort of thing.
You and me both.
Because you want to know why? Because the first time it happened with Groundhog Day, it worked really well, and we don't need to fucking do it again. But Edge of Tomorrow, actually, it like makes sense, and it's actually inventive and also fun. It's
what about
fun
Run
to
Lola
see
Run?
I guess so.
Yeah, that was one of the first ones I saw. I think they made us watch it in college, but I loved it.
I feel like they do it a lot now, and it's like
I haven't seen anybody talk about it actually.
Run Lola Run?
No, I was talking about just like the trope of doing like the
ground.
Yeah.
But I actually rewatched it recently.
Jerry Maguire, $50 million budget, $274 million at the box office. We don't live in that time anymore, folks.
We
also,
don't.
too,
I pretend to, but
we live in a time where Cameron Crowe made good movies back then. I would love to be back then because man hasn't made a damn good movie in a long, long time.
That's the other thing about
Cruise's fault for that too, depending on your mileage with Vanilla Sky.
I think that movie's interesting.
That movie is very interesting.
It is interesting.
That's the nice thing I could say about it is that it's very interesting.
Well, but it's a wide-ranging scope of filmography, though, because I also kind of wanted to include Interview with the Vampire just because it's so out there. Like, it's just I was like, he went there. Like, then it's Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise together. But I know
it was another formative film for me.
Yeah.
Well, then there's even like
a lot of them. It's weird.
I mean, there's Risky Business. I would even say.
Risky Business too.
He's really good. I mean, he's really good in Rain Man. I'm not a big on the film overall. He is
the best performance in Rain Man.
He is the best performance in that movie.
I like The Firm as well. Another sort of.
I was gonna say.
I do too.
Yeah.
A movie of its time, The Last Samurai. Like that's a movie that is definitely of its time.
That's what I can still picture like at Blockbuster, like the video case
of him like riding the horse with the samurai on it.
I do like the long hair Cruise.
I think of him being a part of two great years of cinema, 1999 and 2007, but in 2007 he's with one of the worst films of that year with Lions for Lambs. It's
don't do this now.
I'm just saying the truth.
How dare you besmirch the legacy of Robert Redford as a director on this
man that's directed one great movie and then every other film.
Two great movies.
What's the second one? That's right. I always forget about Quiz Show. Sorry. I love Quiz Show. Yeah, so two great movies and then everything else is.
I do love War of the Worlds as well. And
it was also a moment.
Dark Spielberg.
Austin Powers and Goldmember where he shows up in the first 5 minutes.
It's really interesting though to be like you swing for the fences early on and then him going into this. I mean, I don't blame him because he's also trying to save cinema in a different way. But it's interesting to go to more of like not a cookie cutter character, but like especially given all the drama all the
Yeah.
all the good drama he was the range and stuff. It's not like he can only
Mhm.
do like you
One
know a lot of
thing.
action. Yeah, action stars can only sometimes you can only do like the one thing, but there's range and stuff. I don't know.
I can't wait for him to bring Cocktail back. Cocktail 2, back to the
Oh my
bars.
God.
It's gonna
Yeah.
be great. All
Hopefully
right.
we'll get
Well,
Edge of Tomorrow too.
yeah. Well, we might. Yeah. He's gonna
Emily
just
Blunt's
start
going on acting hiatus.
taps 2. You know what I mean? We'll just start getting
Mhm.
him to tap back into his old filmography.
Risky
See what I do.
Business.
The
too.
Mummy.
Oh my!
Again.
Oh, that's right. The
Just
Dark
stayed-
Universe.
I was like, I don't even
Oh
want
my
to
God, I
mention-
forgot about that.
No.
Thank you, Sophia, for bringing up the Dark Universe.
His worst.
No,
The
that was
worst
the worst thing ever.
Good job bringing that up as we're wrapping it up here.
I had to.
That's going to do it for the
keep it
Awards
humble.
Watch podcast. That's our top 5 Tom Cruise movies. Catherine Gonzalez, can you tell everybody where they can find you and all your work on the internet? But can you also then tell us, since I think this will be a good question to kind of wrap us all up for, is there a director that you would like to see Tom Cruise work with once he gets out of that action mode, like Zach was talking about? So where you are on all the social and where to follow all your work, and then a director you'd like to see Tom Cruise work with before it's all said and done.
Oof. Well, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram at Things Cat Loves. Mostly my dog photos posted there, with a hint of movies and TV. And then you can find my writing at AwardsWatch and also Shuffle Online. And that's a curveball. Maybe going back, maybe not a new one, but maybe going back with Ridley Scott, since Ridley Scott's also swinging for the fences, going crazy. So I think that one, because I'm a little thrown off, so I would have to think more about it. But it would be cool to see him in one of Ridley Scott's films, like go back to it from where it started with.
Go back to working with Ridley. Yeah, that's
Mm-hmm.
good. All right, Sophia.
You can find me on Twitter and Letterboxd at Sophia_Sim. You can find my podcast, Oscar Wilde, on Twitter at Oscar Wilde Pod. We release episodes every Friday. Have one coming this week about the work of George Cukor, which was very fun to record. And then you can find all of my reviews and a big one coming this week to Awards Watch. And I am going to go with Robert Eggers.
Ooh.
Because I think Cruise
Interesting.
needs someone who's very committed and very researched. And you think about like these projects that Eggers does, and they're very detailed, they're very in depth, they're very historically accurate. And I think Cruise would really appreciate that. And I would love to see him get into like a historical indie epic. I feel like that would be really cool. And then my deranged answer is Ari Aster, going again for the A24, just like weird. I like would love for him to play some like, I don't know, coked out therapist or something like that. I think it could be really interesting.
Those are good picks. Those are good picks.
Thank you.
Kat's got a good pick. You got a couple of good picks there. Zach, how about yourself?
So for as long as it's in existence, you can find me on Twitter at Zach Laws.
Fair.
I'm also on Letterboxd and Instagram as Zach Laws as well. You can find my work at Awards Watch. And since Sophia took my answer of
Oh my
Ari
God,
Aster,
for real.
You guys are on the same wavelength today.
We're like,
Good.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's usually how Ryan and I are.
Yeah.
yeah. God. So I was gonna say he almost was the Brad Pitt character in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
That is correct. And he would have won all the
Yeah.
awards for it. There's no question about it.
I'm guessing he's not going to be in Tarantino's final film. So
Don't see it happening.
yeah, that
Could
seems
you
like
imagine if he was the film critic?
Holy shit.
Oh,
I wish.
Short
I
kings
wanna see
everywhere
that.
would unite for that. There you go.
Yeah. Considering this person might be dead by the time Cruise is done with Mission Impossible, I won't say Paul Schrader because I thought, just thinking about like this, but you know what? I'll say it anyway. Schrader will keep
Holy
living on
shit.
forever.
That's crazy,
That is the most insane answer anyone can give, Zach.
but
Holy
perfect.
shit. But,
I was just thinking about like, what he did with Richard Gere in American Gigolo, or
Ethan Hawke.
Ethan Hawke, yeah, First Reformed. Like it's just
bring him back to basics.
yeah, like I feel like Cruise could go in some interesting directions with Paul Schrader.
I think he'd be a good narrator, writing out a journal.
I want to see him sitting at a desk writing in a journal about all of his deepest,
honestly,
darkest.
He would have been a great card counter. That's
Yeah.
Not that Oscar Isaac didn't do a good job, but that would have been a really interesting movie for him. Yeah. Oh, Schrader. Yeah. And could you imagine like Schrader, the Facebook posts we get based off of it? Oh my God. It's so good.
Worked with Tom today.
Yeah. Worked with Tom today. Told me some nutty stuff about wizards and warlocks. Anyway, you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd at Ryan McQuade 77. You can find all my work here at AwardsWatch.com. Do yourself a favor. We have another podcast that releases weekly now on Thursdays. It's called Director Watch, where myself and Jay Ledbetter, we are breaking down films in directors' filmographies. And right now we are currently breaking down the films of Todd Haynes. Our next episode will be Velvet Goldmine. Our first episode was over Safe, and that's already on the feed and on the website. Our next director after that will be Denis Villeneuve. So we're getting you ready and anticipated for May, December. And that little film called Dune Part 2 that's coming out later this year. So please go ahead and listen to that. Please go on iTunes and Spotify and everywhere else and give us a 5-star rating, please. We'd really appreciate that. Also, go over to the website and sign up for the newsletter. I know everybody here signed up for the newsletter. It's really great. We put a lot of effort into it. It's the best way to get all of our reviews, podcasts, interviews, news, everything from the entertainment world all in one place, from Awards Watch and what's going on the website. And everybody's great work here. There's going to be some reviews that are coming out next week. You might want to get that newsletter signed up for and everything. Person that I would love to see Tom Cruise work with. And I asked this question and I heard some great answers and they're all fantastic. And then I didn't think of one myself. I think, well, the obvious answer is Christopher Nolan because they both work on this such giant scale of cinema that they would probably combust the world if they did that. I think of Nolan's really great at working with actors, especially even on scale. I mean, he's worked with, somebody like Leonardo DiCaprio, and he's working with this all-star cast for Oppenheimer. I wouldn't necessarily, that's just the obvious answer. It's not my pick. Somebody that we haven't seen make films in a long time. And I think that her sensibility with action as well as with character would really, really work well. I think Cruise should work with Catherine Bigelow. I think that that's somebody that those two get in a room and get into the details and then work on a script from either Mark Bull or McQuarrie or whoever they want to work with. That she's very detailed oriented, and she's worked with some of the greatest, done a lot of the great set pieces in action films, not necessarily with the biggest budgets either, too. And I think she would also be able to tap into this action star persona and give us, dial it to another level. If he was going to work with a smaller filmmaker, I mean, I think if he worked with somebody like Marielle Heller, that would be another great person to work with because she works really great with actors and does a lot of personal looks at different people. I think also too, Cruise working with women and female directors would actually be a great thing for him. I think of also working with directors of color wouldn't be the worst thing for him either. So, obviously working with somebody like Barry Jenkins or Ava DuVernay would be the right move. I also would love to see him do like television, but if there's also somebody else, and this will be my last pick here, I'm going to say the last one. It's not Paul Thomas Anderson, but again, because I don't think he'll ever do that. But if he wanted to do a reunion, and somebody needs to make a new film, it's Nick Nightingale himself. Todd Field needs to make a new film, and he'll get it greenlit, all right, with Tommy Boy. And he needs to follow up Tar with something else. And so I think that him working together with him, I think that could kind of work. So yeah, those are my picks, and that's been this episode of the Awards Watch Podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and we will be back next week to talk about what else? Barbie and Oppenheimer. It's Barbenheimer or whatever the hell the Oppen Barbie. Is that what it's called, or what's the other Oppen?
It'll be a totally normal conversation.
Yeah, I'm sure we won't get into any hyperbole. No, actually, we're gonna do a great job, I think, next week at talking about both of these films respectively, because it is the biggest weekend so far of the year and the two biggest releases of the year. So, very excited to talk about Barbie and Oppenheimer next week on the show. But until then, we will see you all next time.